Oh, all right. Yeah, but the camera's working. Yeah,
What?
the camera's on.
Camera's on.
Yes, yes.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the, October 28th, 2019 Architectural and Historic Review Board meeting. We have some, excuse me, please, if you'd like to speak, you can stand outside. We have a very packed agenda, so I want to get started, and we're going to try to move fairly quickly. If you are here to discuss a certain project, I ask that you come up to the microphone, state your name, your address, and be brief, just in the, so that everyone can have a chance to speak. First up is 228 Clinton Avenue.
All the doors do not have any muntins, and we mentioned it at the last meeting, but we didn't officially submit it that way. So these are the doors that were installed. On the west elevation, we added a window here. There were a lot of interior changes that were made for the new owner. And also the garage doors slightly changed in the design that was here before. And then on the east elevation, we eliminated windows that were down here in the basement because there's now a shop and living room there. And there were double windows here. We now have 3 windows on this facade. And all the arch details we eliminated because of cost, really. So we're asking you to review and approve these minor changes to the house.
Do you have a sheet with the previously approved drawings?
No, I didn't bring it with me. I'm so sorry.
Mr. Romer, do you have the approved set by any chance? Thank you. I think that, in theory, all of the things you're saying are perfectly reasonable. I just would like to take a look at what was approved. I think I'll just start on the south elevation with the elimination of the arch, the decorative arch. I see no issue. As far as the muntins on the doors, it's at the back of the house. And it's a fairly kind of open, large lot, and I see no issues there. There is, what is the change on the east elevation, both on the first and second floor? I see the cloud, but I'm not, yes.
We eliminated the arch detail. We had a different layout here. I think we had 2 windows in the middle, now we have
Okay.
3.
All right.
There's a bathroom up there and it moved. The interior layout was changed.
Sure.
There's a glow up here, because we found out our original drawing didn't show the right muntin layout. There were like 5 panes of 6 up here. And then down below in the basement, we eliminated the window as requested by the owners because it's a utility room. They needed wall space on it.
And the new garage door is just a painted wood or aluminum and with those 2 windows on each door, is that?
Yes.
Okay, so there's not.
We had a dark stained mahogany door.
I think we should just have a brief look at the approved drawings for the sake of prudence.
The changes are minor.
Yeah, if you remember it.
No, you can remember the last one.
Are there any neighbors here for this project? No, didn't think so. Mhm.
These are covered.
We don't have. Everyone fine with this? Yeah. All right. If going forward, if you would kindly include the previously approved drawings, it would help us a bit. But I don't think there's a whole lot to discuss here, so I'd like to make a motion. We approve this as submitted. Do I have a second? Yeah, your seconds. It's unanimous. Okay, thanks. 28 Lafergie Avenue, please.
It's not working, right? She's asking about the microphone.
She, is that?
You have to speak loud.
Just speak loud.
It's not working today.
So my name is Evelyn West, I'm an architect for, like, I am Person. I was hired to actually do a renovation of a basement of home office. That's in Blank. The house is a split level house, where this is the,
Yes.
well, I don't know, you have the drawings, you have this. This is the front elevation. So this is the home office, this is the way it exists right now. And we were asked to provide a big double sliding door with an additional, and then next to it, we going to the back elevation. This is where we are doing this big sliding door. And behind there is like a room which is not really a bedroom, I mean, this is a bedroom, so we provided additional windows. There is a blind facade on here, there's no windows. So all the windows that we are adding to this project are on this facade, basically the two windows for this bedroom, additional windows for the family, and some additional, so that the elevation is a little bit more homogeneous.
Proposed south. To the center of that way.
That's the other, that's the north elevation.
That's the new one.
Well, except for the image you showed.
This face.
How she's supposed to do the windows.
Oh, she's adding new.
Yeah.
All
The
of
image
these
you
are
showed
new.
was,
All of
So,
these.
windows.
Here.
This
On
side
this
is the
facade.
change. This is the south elevation.
But where's the existing of that? That's not that.
Yeah,
No, that's this one.
yeah, that's not bad. You just had a photo of it.
Oh, you did.
You got a photo.
So are there windows on that side? Because I can't tell what's
No.
existing.
Can you show us the existing photos of the home, like the four sides, and stuff, so we can orientate ourselves a little bit better?
Yeah, see, that's the opposite side.
Maybe all these windows are outside now.
yeah, I think that's not exactly what's happening. I think that blank facade is remaining blank.
Okay.
Just this is called,
Yeah. So is that south or north? That's the north side. So at the moment, both the north and the south elevation have no windows. Okay. So everything in drawing 2 on A200 is a new opening.
exactly.
Okay, I got it. And then the other one just stays the same. So those are the only new windows, and then you're replacing in the back, new big door and new window for the bedroom.
Yeah, so these are the new egress, these
Yeah.
are the family room. And above there are 2 bedrooms, the master bedroom and another bedroom. So we're just basically adding, and the most important thing is and provide the owner with a nice home office daylight under this porch and make it nice here and inviting home office that, you know, inviting people to work in. And then so I kind of grew into this bedroom and found in the family room and providing more daylight and make this facade a little bit more nicer and homogeneous, rather than just adding where it was needed for program. Program was not in the office and so we wanted to, yeah, so it's much. This is pretty much how it looked like, although that it had that look.
So the new windows are facing the neighbor, not the school.
Yes,
Correct.
yes. This is, you know, this is the one that,
Okay.
the existing facade only, yes,
Got it.
faces the street.
And you have the small windows very high up because you're using those walls as the bed walls for the bedrooms?
Exactly. This
Okay.
bed,
Yeah.
the door is against that wall, so,
Okay.
and plus the bedroom has already, of course, the bed, you know, existing on the other side, on this side.
And then are you, I don't see a datum line, but it looks close. Are you aligning the top of those windows on the north elevation?
All of
To
the
the-
windows are aligned, headers are aligned.
Okay, good, that's all.
And also, all of the windows are Anderson 400 series, and all of them are pretty much, everything is matching existing.
Okay.
This one is just windows, she's.
Yeah, any neighbors here? No? Not to cut you short, but if you, I think this is pretty straightforward and it's done the right way, and so we don't have any questions, any comments. So I'd like to make a motion, we approve this as submitted. And your seconds? Unanimous? Okay, thank you. Bye. 40 DeVoe Street.
I don't know if anything's changed since the last submission. I have no idea. Right, it's like he was here before us, so it's like, it keeps, it looks. It's like he's pushed it.
Whenever you're ready.
Oh, yes, please.
Now, how do you decide this one?
No, just speak loud.
Just speak loud?
It picks it up.
Good. So this is 40 DeVoe. We came before you a couple of months ago when this was before the planning board. We showed you the idea of multiple different ways of doing the site. You made a recommendation to the planning board for one of them. That was the one that they selected. So they went ahead with the 3 townhouse units. The illustration there is effectively pretty much what it is. A little bit of differences here, but we haven't revised the SketchUp model. The biggest difference is those are not the colors, but we'll get to the colors in a minute. This is down on DeVoe. Here's the village's park. Little park here, the football field. So this is coming down from Storage Street. This is Ashford Road over here. It's a relatively large lot on the site. Technically, we have the square footage for 4 units, but this is the MDR1, so we're going with a unit house. Units, you've got the drawings, so I'm not going to go through any of that, but we've got questions about it. The site plan is site plan, 3 townhouses staggered, so that as you're coming down the hill, they kind of recede. The house next door is set back here. The house on this side is fairly up front. So this seemed to work well. The planning board felt that it set it with the feel of the neighborhood in terms of, they were actually surprised it didn't feel more massive. I have some images I can show that in a minute. It staggers to the back the same way. There's a small deck on the back of each, a small porch on the front of each, 1 parking space outside, 1 parking space inside. Do you have any interest in the units? Or should
Has
you-
anything changed since your last submission before the AHRB?
Yeah. I mean, the submission we made for the ARB was looking at different layouts of the site. So we didn't get involved in anything to do with trim, windows, or any of that kind of stuff. So all that's effectively good.
What about the massing?
Massing is effectively the same, although we changed some of the pitches so that things would work better on the house.
It looks taller.
Well, it meets code.
What is effectively the same? Like, how much did it grow?
It didn't get any taller.
Didn't get any taller.
The roof pitch got steeper, so what we did is when we came up with the roofs, we actually flattened out, so that what we've got, is you don't see it, but there's a section on the top of the house that's actually flat. So it comes up to the same house, the same height.
But probably that's why it looks a little more massive.
Yeah, I think though that the steeper pitch, I think, makes it look nicer on the street. You'll see an illustration in a minute that I think will make that work. Do you want to see any of the plan stuff, or just give me?
You can skip through it. We have the packet. We looked at it. But we may refer back to one of the.
Go to this. Here's the roof plan. I can say where it is, okay. Here's the roof plan. So what happens is this roof sloping up and this roof sloping up, they actually don't come to a ridge together. And the other one, it went up higher, so that you get the small square roof on it, which enables us to comply with the height restrictions. Okay, so here's the front. 3 garages. The garages are set back 4 feet from the front, so they're underneath the overhang. You've got the garage alongside of them, it sticks out. And one of the changes, Deputy, that you were asking, in the other plan, we showed these as hips. We dropped these down and made them sheds. Since we were introducing the shed roofs on dormers on the house, with metal, we repeated that on these 3 elements. We have the same in the back. So that kind of ties around. Garage doors are metal frame with frosted glass inserts, so it's a kind of clean aesthetic. It's consistent with other projects that the same developer is doing in other places. The sides, which are relatively close to neighbors, are relatively minimal with windows. Here's the back. Large windows. These are actually very large windows, opening up to the backyard. There's a small room in the basement with glass with a light well. This is what we're doing with the shed dormers, which are effectively all glass on the front. I think that's everything with elevations. One thing just to point out is this is shiplap. The bottom of half of the house is shiplap. The top half of the house is clapboard in the same color in a hardy plank. So this feels very smooth, and this gets the texture of the clapboards themselves. So it breaks the massing up in relatively subtle way, because it's all the same color, which is an Arctic white. Okay, section, I don't know if you need anything in that. This is one of the primary concerns, I think, that you'll have on it. This sheet shows the sky exposure plane. And the drawing I'm going to put up next is very small. So I made 11 by 17 copies, which are also very small. Can I approach?
Yeah, of course.
It's this one, right? This one?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I forgot I gave it. Actually, I didn't need to do this, but I made it. I forgot that I did it.
Here we have.
So And those look better.
Do you know the height?
This one is better,
Same thing.
one is small.
But smaller, yeah, this is a bigger one.
Oh, it's here.
So what we're dealing with is the sky exposure plane hits into the side, the house on both sides, the front. We cut into the gable. On the front, the back is obviously fine. Actually, before I get to the, where's this so slow? This, just really quickly, so we can get to that next sheet. This is the landscaping plan, which is in your set, showing planting trees in the back, trees behind the little terrace areas, and then trees, street trees that we're putting in along the front. We originally proposed a tree, a flowering tree, that the village engineer recommended that we do something different. So we will. Okay, so this one. Okay, so, this is a section of that drawing. All of the houses on the street, with the exception of the one at the bottom, significantly cut into the sky exposure plane. So we're consistent with the character of the existing neighborhood, which is one of the tests in the code. You can also see in this the steepness of some of the roof pitches on here, which are more akin to what we're showing than what we were showing before, which were I think a 7 to 12. I think now we're at 10 to 12. And then we've got, again, these are not the colors, but they give some sense of what the massing is of the house. Obviously, the dormers are different, but this is looking down the street, and the way that the house kind of sets back in. Here's the building that's set back further at the bottom.
Would you go back just a little more slowly through those so we can look at them? Thank you.
So, anyone in particular?
Well, I'm more interested in a real view, a street view, so maybe two more ahead of this one. Yeah, like somewhere around there.
Yeah, here's
Go back one. It's tricky with the trees there.
Yeah, but I have a couple coming up that I
Okay.
think are more street. So, and the idea is the trees will be there. This comes out, it doesn't stick as far forward as this house. This doesn't stick as far back as that, but it blends it. This is looking up the street. Then I guess most of these, well, this is the back. Again, those dormers have changed. This one's the same. This roof is now just coming straight through with the shed dormer. This one's coming straight through with the shed dormer.
Is that a view that you'll get across the cemetery from Ashford? Sort of. I mean, there's those trees are gone now, so
Yeah,
it's very open.
Yeah, the cemetery actually isn't anywhere near where this is. This is back behind English Lane. So if you go, if you go down English Lane.
So this is far enough down the hill where as you pass the church, if you're coming up, you won't see it across the cemetery.
Right, this is
It's
actually,
behind it. Okay.
this structure, and then this one, this is the one that's right next to Blue Park.
Okay.
So we're that far down. So you don't see this from the cemetery. You will, if you come down to English Lane, and they build a house on that lot, they will be able to see it in their backyard. But the setback in the backyard is about twice the distance of what's required. One of the advantages of this massing was that we were able to not put any structure in the backyard, so that some of the neighbor houses do have structures in their backyard, but this one are all open, so I think it keeps that sense of backyard on the street, which I think is good.
How many square feet is each unit?
Each unit is about 1,900 square feet, a little bit less, 1,500.
That's excluding the attics or?
Excluding the attic
and excluding the garage?
basement.
Garage, okay.
Right. And this is for sale as condos.
Patty, on your north or east, especially on your north elevations, you don't seem to have the midpoint to the roof. It just looks really massive.
You want me to go to the elevation?
Yeah. I mean, if you just add up,
Yeah.
Yeah, that last drawing was pretty good, actually. The one
Yeah,
that's,
that's the previous.
ah, well, that drawing in the new street.
I thought there was one drawing on which you had shown that midpoint, and I can't find it anymore.
It's here, so it's right here, it's the
Oh.
north elevation. So he's got midpoint here.
It's on this SP drawing.
Oh, that one, SP drawing. Oh, I
SP
was
one,
looking at that.
1.3.
I see.
Might go the other way. I mean, you've got 2 stories and like a 5-foot coming out of the ground.
It just looks really top-heavy.
It doesn't look, it is massive. You know,
It's just really
can I say
top-heavy.
the obvious? It's a big structure. It's
Right.
not in character with the
It's 3
street.
residential units.
Yes, if you can pick 4, 5, whatever, it's still massive. And my take is, you mentioned something that is in character with the street, and, you know, your street elevation shows that it's not. Now, the way that you break it, look, it's very simple. You just go to this page, and you see it.
You see that it's bigger than most of the other houses on the
It's
street.
big, look, there, I counted 5 houses that are 2 stories, 3 houses that are 2.5 stories, 2 houses that are 3 stories, 1 house that is a 3.5 story, and counting your house is a 4-story house, without counting the top of the ridge, which is another attic. So we are talking about the structure that to the ridge is a 5-story structure.
Except it meets the code. It's a
Code
2.5
is,
story.
no, but except that we have we can make an opinion of what we think it's appropriate to the street or not. So I think that's what we are talking about. If it meets the codes, we wouldn't need an AHRB, isn't it?
Well, the AHRB, I think, is to deal with those things that are not code.
Which is character, context, et cetera,
Color details. things like
and
that.
color and details.
So I mean, there was a lot of discussion about the massing. There were 5 different options that were shown in terms of different massing.
Which is,
By the time
if
we got-
I remember correctly, is the same thing that I'm saying now.
Is what?
What I said back then is the same thing.
Perhaps. But the recommendation this board made to the planning board was that of the different options, this was the preferred. The other ones were
Which we
not
said,
as
which
big.
we said, I remember saying that. I recognize that Debo Street was a street that has a character that was worth preserving and respecting. And thank you for the page that you show the street, because it's a revealing piece of information that I think we should take into account.
Yeah, it was the sheet that the planning board asked specifically so that they could make that determination as to whether or not the proposed structure fit in well enough with the street, and they decided that it did.
Okay. So I disagree.
It doesn't matter. I think that it's just really top-heavy for what you have as an elevation facade. It, you know, it just doesn't compute. And that's why I asked you if you had changed something on there. You said you changed, obviously, changing the pitch is making it even more top-heavy.
it's making it, giving it a more sense of vertical, which makes it,
Exactly.
but it's still fitting in with the, this is the style of the other houses on the street, which is something that people prefer when we show the different options.
Oh, go ahead.
Listen, I remember the fact that it breaking up into 3 individual looking townhomes was what we had recommended, because the other option was an even more massive structure that looked like one big huge building, right?
No, I know, actually, the other options were mostly breaking this up into more separate. Yeah, the alternative to this one was where we had 3 rectangles linked just at the corners. And so it felt like 3 separate houses that were touching. There was one that we had that had 3 in a row coming back, more like a little, almost like a cottage court. But this was the one that was most massive up at the street.
Yeah, that's not my recollection of it. And in terms of the 3 individual or 3 townhomes, the roof lines were very much in question when you came to us last time. And they've changed significantly since you've presented to us last time.
They're exactly the same, except they're steeper by 3/12. We went from 7s to 10s.
That's a big difference.
I agree. I think it's, and I understood the reason that people preferred it, which was to have it look more like the other houses on the street. So
Well, that wasn't an opinion of this board.
Not of this board, and certainly doesn't reflect it on this drawing, for sure.
Well, actually, if you look at both sides of the street, you'll see that most of the houses have the steeper base roof,
But a much smaller mass.
okay?
It
They're not
justifies
3
that.
residential units.
It doesn't on this particular project.
I think that, I don't know, we're not asking to start back at point 0. I think we looked at the various options, and I think this, I still believe that this is the right choice. That the planning options that you presented us, of those 3, this, where each of the units kind of shifts back as you go down the street, and they each have their own kind of individual kind of massing. I don't think we should revisit that, but I do think that I do know that what matters are the details, and we looked at a schematic plan massing options the last time. So I don't know if we need to get into nitpicking about what's changed or what's different, because we didn't have a real scheme to look at. Now we do. And I think that what's telling and what's important is the conversation about sky exposure plane. Now, I understand that the neighborhood is one of these neighborhoods with small lots and 2.5-story homes. And if you were to apply the sky exposure plane logic to neighborhoods like that, well, no one meets that. However, that sky exposure plane issue is still one that we have to look at, and that while it's not intended to prevent someone from building a 2.5-story house on a legal lot, how it applies to a multifamily unit is a little bit different, and it's not it's that our code isn't as specific as would be convenient to determine that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
I think, number one, part of what we have to do is entertain what a compliant sky exposure plane scheme looks like and does for your program and your aspirations for this site. So that's a question we have to ask, we need to answer to one degree or another, and that can come in the form of simplified sketches, or, I mean, we can talk about that a little more as we go on. But I think what the sky exposure plane tells us, and what I think we're seeing kind of just intuitively, is that the building is quite a bit taller, and for that reason just more massive than what is happening on the street. Now, I know your lot's wider, right? You have an 80-foot wide lot, and these other lots are 40. Some of them are really small. Some of them are, 40, I don't have a survey of all that.
Yeah, they go from 25 up to this.
So, let's discount those very, very small ones, because, you know, they're anomalies. But I think on a lot like this, which is kind of essentially double the lot of what most of the other houses have, you've got more than double the massing, and I think that's what we're all struggling with. And what I see is, and I know you can, there are ways that you can use kind of semantic ways, so to speak, to get around the fact that really you have 4 stories here. And I think that it's pretty obvious to everyone who looks at it that it's more of a 4-story building than a 2.5-story building. The reason is that you've got your first floor, and you can look at the section. The section tells us everything we need to know.
The first floor.
Because the section shows us that you cut your section and you see 4 full floors, plus some additional roof area.
Well, it's not, it's a.
Well, you got like some
it's a
high roof
full
areas.
basement and with an attic, it's usable. And that's what the code says it is, and that's.
I understand, but therein lies our problem, which is that kind of, semantic acrobatics to get to this, leads us to a place where we have
But we can talk about.
a building that is out of scale with the neighborhood. So what is the solution here? I'm curious about the size of the roof. How can you address the roof in a way that mitigates that issue?
Well, I mean, we could do a more vibrant version of what we've already done, which is that we could take this height and basically cap that, so, and maybe even step it down, so that what you would lose this mass at the top. That would significantly reduce the technical height of the house. That would also keep the steeper pitches, which is something that makes it look better, in my opinion and in others' opinion. So this idea, we have to start with this idea that you've got a garage underneath, so you're getting rid of your parking, which is one of the things that you guys preferred when we were here last time. And we were doing that instead of having the cars.
Yeah, no, as you see, my goal is to work with you to
Right.
get this to work.
So I think if we start with this structure, with this being a basement with 2 floors above, and relatively modest attic space for that, right? And we have 3 of those on the front, I think what we're talking about is how this mass gets handled. So there are bunches of different things that can be done. Some of them I think would be, technically perhaps, would be reducing it, but would create an unfortunate appearance. So I think it's defining the one that makes it still look good, and if you'd like, reduce the map. For example, if these were kept at this 10 and 12, and all of these roofs were set back at, say, a 6 and 12, you basically have this mass would effectively go away. It wouldn't get as high, it would be the height of these ridges. But I'm not sure having the bastard valleys is something that would be as aesthetically pleasing as a roof that just makes sense with 45-degree valley. So an alternative would be to cut the top of it and reduce significant amount of mass. That would be viable to do. That would keep the pitch. I would want to see what it actually looks like, but I don't think there's any place you're able to look down on this.
Yeah, no, I don't know what the solution is either. I'm telling you what the problems
Well,
are.
those are 2 ways that you can reduce that mass.
I mean, you have an 8-foot ceiling and an attic as well.
No, it's more than
Usable
that, they're a
space.
double attic.
It's,
It's a double attic, it's
Right.
an attic and a floor and a half.
and it's got beautiful windows looking out in every direction.
It's a,
for
the
views,
mechanical,
right?
the
Like you're-
mechanical storage is a full floor, plus an extra,
Yeah,
I would
it's very
say, 8
intended
feet.
usable space.
So it's about
Yeah, it's not
12 to
what I would
14
traditionally
feet
call an
attic.
attic, right? It's usable space, it's livable
Right,
space.
well, technically, the concern I have with being technical on this is that we have certain code requirements, New York State building code, those things, so I don't wanna have anybody say this is a 4-story building, because we're not compliant with 4-story buildings in terms of definition. We are 2.5 stories by the New York State building code, so that's what we bid. That doesn't change what your concern is.
Yeah, but, okay, so we have an 8-foot recreation room right? Which is at level with the driveway.
Right.
And then we have a 9'4" family room, which is perfectly fine. An 8-foot master bedroom, an 8-foot attic, and on top of it, we have another 6th-floor super attic. So it's I think it's out of proportion with the street. I mean, you can have the biggest house and it's fine. So make 2 houses instead of 3 big houses. I'm saying.
The 3 units, this is a real estate investment, and this,
I
and having the
understand.
3 units is critical.
Patty, could you stand up, the count?
Okay. We need a stool. I think the idea would be to remove some of this mass. As you just went through on here, if we ended up with an area that's 8 feet on the attic floor, we'd get what we're trying to accomplish, but we wouldn't need what you're referring to as the super attic.
Yeah, because when I take when I scale the height from and I'm looking at the north elevation, if I look at the high point of the roof and measure straight down to where it intersects the line that's representing the street, I get 48 feet. And while I understand that you're not technically creating a 4-story building, I think we could all agree that 48 feet is the height of a 4-story building.
With a flat.
Yeah. And therein lies the sort of answer to our intuitive reaction to this.
It's not intuitive.
Well, sorry,
Obvious.
that's why we're having this issue. So I don't know what the solution is, but I think you know what our issues are, and I think you can resolve them without having to decimate the program of this project. I mean, I think the 3 townhouse concept is sensible and a good one, and I think that the site plan, has promise, and you've just gotta do something about the massiveness of the top of the building. Just come up with a couple solutions, you can send us, you don't have to flesh out the whole project again, you can,
Well, I have to also make sure it works.
Of course,
I wanna
but-
do something that, I'm suspicious always of renderings that can make things look like things have gone away.
I'm not asking you to do that, I'm asking you to come up with a real solution.
No, we're looking at your drawings, we're not even looking at the
So I think
renderings.
what we would do is we would look at the actual structure of what we can do. And I'm looking for a response from you guys at this point, that if we were basically finding a way of having this roof, the back roof, if you will, where it's hitting closer to the ridges of the front roof.
I think that's gonna take you a very long way. What happens is that you're gonna lose some of that usability in the attic, which is,
Maybe some.
that's just
Actually,
tough,
no,
that's.
Yeah, I think if we take this line and we bring that across, we basically have, as I pointed out, we have the 8-foot section left.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that it's not, you may have to eat into some of the attic program, which is really not gonna, it's not your ideal scenario, but it's also not, we're not asking you
I'm perfectly
to
willing
take out a
to do
unit
that.
or
I
take
think-
out 20% of your square footage. We're asking
Right, I
you to
think
be
that-
sensible about the attic, where if you've gotta lose massing, it's an easy place to lose it without costing you a lot in terms
So I
of
think the idea
square footage.
of cutting that down is something we can certainly take a look at and make work. Obviously, that's one thing. Elevations, windows, concerns with any of that.
The rear facade the rear elevation is kind of disappointing.
It's disappointing.
Yeah, the rear elevation is not as successful because it lacks the clarity of the front elevation. It kind of doesn't relate to the front. But it's kind of, it happens, it's a totally different animal, and that's why it looks more massive at the back than in the front.
Well, if this is cut to say here, that would make a big difference.
All I'm saying is the front elevation looks like 3 townhouses.
Right.
And the rear elevation looks like
One massive house.
one massive house.
These are stepping. They're doing exactly the same thing as the front story.
Still.
The 3 masses are stepping. Each one has a court depth.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a single plane of the roof that's giving that impression.
No,
And I guess when you revisit the roof, I think you have an opportunity to also,
to define the townhouse
Yeah.
concept. And what's happening is in the front elevation, as you see, it's like there are three independent units.
Right.
In the back,
well, you have the 3 independent units, it just breaks down above the roof line. Like you can see, from, you know, I'm sorry I don't have the laser, but the definition is there until you get to the roof, and then the definition kind of breaks down.
Yeah.
Nah, I know, you know what I'm getting.
This homogenizing that was intentional to make it calm down in the back, so, you know, that would be better. And the whole idea of simplifying these so that they weren't babies and didn't make it seem like it was more of like a Victorian kind of thing. I thought that brought it down a lot, just in general energy, which I thought was positive. I'm still kind of troubled with Ahr's comment that this is stepping, it's got different massing that's going in and out on it. I would think that it would break down fairly well. I don't see that as being,
I'll take Paul's comment that when we have the new roof lines.
Yeah, I think it's just.
Just
the
keep it in
massive-
mind, and if it's not something that works out, you know, it's not the end of the world, it's just, you know, you're,
but I wouldn't want to start throwing gables on this.
you know, maybe when you do the thing you're talking about, there's some sort of subtle distinction between, you know, where those roofs, something may come up where you can define again the line of the individual unit on the roof. And if not, then we'll be looking at this from a different perspective because it'll be a different shaped
What
building.
about colors and materials? You want to see those?
Today?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Permission to approach.
I mean, I think just reading what you have in the section, everything seems like you know, they're all good materials, we're not too worried about that.
Well, they're all a certain quality of builders materials. Their houses that we do, they're a little. So, my initial concept, when I heard what the owner wanted to do, I was concerned because I had not seen it. And then I started seeing it everywhere. And I've seen it on projects that he's done, and it comes out looking pretty well. It's a very stark kind of palette. So what you're dealing with is this color, not this texture. It's smooth. It's the Hardy Plank Arctic White. The windows
It's white.
are dark. I convinced not to go with the black, to go with this instead. I think it's softer, maybe it'll be nicer. The two verticals that separate the gables on the front, I'd like to do something that articulates that difference and go with the night gray in the same material, just in that one section, so when you look at it from the street, it reinforces that look. The stucco on the foundations is Dorian gray, so it'll always look the same age. I think that's pretty much the main ones. The roof, yeah, I have that. It's a very dark, certainty roof that is not quite black. Although black is the one that's been requested with the client. It's not this really, it's this one, Stormy Night. It just has a little bit of gray in it, so it doesn't feel like it's that dead black. And it's also got this articulation of the black, so you see it more as you see the idea of the shingles better, which I think is nice.
Fake shadow.
Yeah, then the offset, the gutters and the downspouts are white, but today when we were looking at other projects that the developer has done, he's done those with black, which actually looks pretty cool.
If that's what your trim is, your trim is the metal was the casement window cladding and the standing seam?
And then, the color circle here somewhere.
And you made
The
pictures of
charcoal
the
brick.
garage doors?
Yeah, Colpe, have
Or
you
you
seen
like-
those?
have not?
It's those, which are, we've used them on a bunch of houses. They're, when I first saw them, I was very nervous. Pictures, the kind of thing somebody drive through, but never had any problem with it. It's an aluminum frame, done in a gray black, and then it's got a, basically a frosted glass panel. You can even get them insulated glass. And the aluminum is insulated.
Doesn't look like it
This is
belongs
the,
to the style.
One,
Well,
two,
it's a very modern looking palette.
It is, it's very nice, I like it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't belong with the style on what you have.
Well, what's the style? I mean, it's that one that everyone's talking about now. What is it, modern American vernacular?
Yeah.
You're good at making.
I just,
What are you counting stories?
I mean, what you're showing
no,
us.
I'm just saying, you
Yeah.
have, you have
What
three,
you're showing us is very modern.
Yeah. Well, I-
that's a different house.
It's a different house.
That's,
doesn't it?
that's up next.
That's up next?
Yeah.
Approved.
It's just, if you think about this as a individual
Right.
unit, it's a small unit,
Mhm.
a very small unit, and you've got 9-inch, 6-inch with, this is a 9-inch with some kind of reveal detail.
Yeah. The break between the two.
Yeah, so I don't know, some kind of thing like this, I don't
It's-
know, whatever it is.
All it would
you
be
know.
is like a drip edge. So it pushes the clapboard out to the right dimension, and then,
So
and it would be in the same material.
it's more like this. Anyway, and then again, a third.
Well, the third is the same metal that's on the roof. So it's,
No, this is AZEK beadboard, so.
Oh.
1, 2,
or it's the metal.
3. Oh, this could be metal.
Yeah. Like my version of it is that the roof, the metal roof, does the top and the sides, so all of that
What he's
is.
saying is too
Maybe
small of a
just,
surface.
as you look at this,
Too many materials.
you're gonna revise slightly,
Right.
maybe one less.
Yeah,
You,
variety.
you keep the 9-inch, or you keep the 6-inch, or you, I don't know.
Makes sense.
Well, just differentiating between the clapboard and the.
There is
clapboard, I think
there is
you need
something
some
dimensional.
dimensional difference.
There is something between each unit.
Yeah,
You change
that's the gray.
that, but then
It's a minor point relative to the
You're
big
concerned
question.
there are more materials than you'd like to see.
Yeah, it's too busy for the, it's too much going on. For the
On
amount
the
of
side, I mean, these
space.
materials turn the corner, and you can see the sides from the street. And the
Definitely,
sides
you can see it
are
from Ashford too. Across. You're gonna see the back of it and see everything.
Yeah, we were just looking at the site plan.
You will, you will see, it coming up.
From the corner. You
Definitely.
can see straight through that.
Because this building stops here.
And the
You'll
house next to it's not
definitely
close
see
enough to
that.
block it. So you can see it from Ashford. You'll see the massing from Ashford. Coming up the hill.
Maybe,
Coming up that hill, you get over that ridge
Yeah,
right
like,
there, and then all of a sudden,
wow, look at that. That's
or there's a
We're
lot of
trying to
colors on
get
that.
there, Patty, it's not there yet.
kind of hell. Okay, I mean, all that I think makes sense. The material thing, I don't think it would be improved to simplify the material on the dormers, to have them be one of the materials from below, because I think that would kind of make you more aware of that being siding, which I don't think you want up past when you start the roof.
So the width of each unit is different.
The two ends are the same, the center
The
one's a
dormers are
couple
gonna have
feet
to go
wider.
when you're done.
Right.
I mean, that's the other, that
The dormers
you,
don't work.
so when I look at this, right, there's a couple things, and I know we had, I look at the sky exposure plane issue, because this really is my biggest concern, because what we have been saying for a long time now is that new houses, new construction needs to conform to that unless there's some kind of,
A good reason not to.
yeah, really good reason.
Yeah.
So, and the good reason is you can't do it any other way. Now, and so
You can't do it any other way as choosing the three
reasonably,
townhouses.
not just,
In that.
I don't want to do it the other way, but
Right.
there are some constraints that the
The-
site presents that prevent you from doing
The
it.
cottage court moved in from the side yards far enough that we were not then hitting it. But that meant that we were occupying the entire backyard. So when you were standing in the other people's backyards, you'd be looking at somebody's house that way. You'd feel like you're
I'm
enclosed. So
not,
think the
I don't know
plan
what
would-
cottage court means.
If you had like 3 cottages going deep, with the driveway going parallel to it, coming off the street and then pulling into each unit that way.
Okay,
so-
so you were rotating the buildings.
Buildings.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah,
Instead of 60 feet wide, you were 40 feet wide. So you had 20 feet.
I know we had talked about, one of the things we had preferred, because you asked us about this, was the location of the building relative to the street front. And so, that we prefer to have it closer to the street and more
Get rid of the
backyard.
car and the parking
However,
lot.
in looking at this, it looks to me like, just looking at sky exposure plane from the, so we're dealing with this on 3 facades, right? We're dealing with it in the
Yeah.
front, we're dealing with this, so when we're here,
I mean, we have plenty of rear yard.
yeah, I mean,
So if
exactly,
you're-
so
I
if
don't
you were
know
to
if it's a
shift
planning
this
board.
back slightly, look, you have to do some things, I think
Is
we,
that planning board, or is that something they can do?
Here we go back to planning.
Yeah, the drainage plan, check.
Drainage.
Well, yeah, you're changing the location.
it-
Relative to your site plan, Patty, something
it
will change in your
addresses,
engineering.
look, I'm not sure what the right answer is yet.
Okay.
I'm
I mean,
trying to
we'll
talk
look
through
at
some of the problems. Here's one, by moving that,
Yeah,
you address it to some degree.
Given the fact that the other houses are up on the setback line,
Yeah, maybe that's
I mean,
not the right.
they're on the front yard, they're not, and they're completely in the sky exposure plane, I don't think that is somehow affecting the character of the neighborhood. It's actually kind of like, I mean, the house next door is exactly that big gable, but it's all the way up.
Yeah.
The dormers effectively
I know,
just
but-
add more
but the-
onto that.
But they'll get affected if you come back with a different design anyways, those dormers.
Well, we're not gonna come back with a different design, we're
For
gonna
the
come back
roof.
addressing the things that we've talked about.
Well, the roof will
Affecting
need
the
to,
roof, yeah.
right, exactly, and that will affect the dormers.
Yeah, I don't think,
think-
So,
well, my opinion of one of the 5 is I don't think the dormers, I think the dormers just add heaviness to the top of the house.
Expand our space.
I understand that, but it adds.
From the inside, but
On
not
the
from the
inside, but not on the
outside.
outside.
all right, hold on, so can you, let's go back in.
Okay, here, let me see.
You need 2 cars per unit, parking for 2
Yeah,
per unit.
we
And,
have one in the garage and one.
yeah,
setback.
I see, I'm just, again, looking at if your first floor were on the, really on the first level, and this whole thing came down,
But the garage.
but then you have, you have, do you have enough width to get 2 cars in the front?
And that way you'd have 6 cars parked along the street, which I think would look like a parking lot. And if you look at those other houses on the street, many of them have a basement that's full of upgrade, with 2 floors above. In fact, a lot of them have the basement, the 2 floors above, and then a usable attic. You don't even have a basement.
That's immediately when I asked, roofs get changed. Right, 3 on one, that's a lot.
Yeah, 34 is that,
The capital.
probably the only one.
He was able to keep that space because of the high pitch. If he moves it, she doesn't have the space. Less than half the space.
Any other comments, questions?
And another one to take a look at is the one that's up at the corner, or Storm, in Devo, where it's actually It theoretically is compliant with the sky exposure point, because that's the side, but that's actually the front. And the whole front, the whole side of the house is in the sky exposure plane, and that's actually a taller structure than what was proposed.
The large house that was renovated a
Yeah.
few years ago.
Is that the one that's on sale? No,
I wasn't
was it on sale?
on the board when that was approved. Can't say what, can't comment on that.
Doesn't,
Well done.
just last comment for me. Doesn't bother you that it's three widths on a similar rhythm? Like small, middle, big? Okay, this front elevation.
Right, the front elevation
They
is two
said-
equal sides.
No, it's not. Smaller, it's width.
No, the width of the two sides is the same.
I'm talking about the dormer, the dormer. I just,
Oh, the dormers, there's no,
no,
Yeah,
the
but-
front house is wide.
But that may be something you have to address anyway, because you know, to get more compliant to sky exposure plane, if those are three equal, you have a 19,
But it's not equal. It's-
I know, you have a 19-foot, two equal on the outside, two 19-foot widths, one 21-foot width.
No, forget about it. It's just that we go to the facade, the front facade. This is small, this is medium, this is big.
Now, look at the space between.
It doesn't matter what the plan
What it
is,
is
it's,
one
it doesn't
on the
reflect
end
the
doesn't
plan,
have
it
the-
might
It's
be
just
whatever
what
it
you
is,
see,
it's
the
just,
facade
it's-
is it's like father,
But the width of
daughter,
it
and
is the same.
whatever. You know,
Yeah,
What was that again? I'm sorry.
the width of
It's
the
a
highest
window.
unit.
yeah,
doesn't have any
I
difference.
missed that.
So the gable is the same
strange.
width as the middle one.
thing. You try to be
you're right,
rhythm
Yeah.
and create A, B, C, which is. Okay, we'll wait for the.
I think he has a good point. I mean, that might actually help you,
It's, you know,
With
make
your
it
ma-
more
if you were to-
clear so that I know it.
pardon?
What's the exact point? That it should not be the same, or it should be the same?
Well, if they are the same, but they take as a rhythm either the smaller, the one on the, all the way to the left or in the middle, that will allow you a little more space in between them, and then also a smaller roof, it's gonna help your case. Right, because as you move across, this one is the widest, right? So
He's saying that this
is-
one and this one are the same,
No,
actually.
No, they're not.
The width of the units is the same, but the one on the high
This
side
is
doesn't
two,
have the
this is
zipper.
number two.
So the
This
pitch
is three.
portion
Yeah.
is one,
This
it's
is
about the
one.
same as the middle one.
It's 1, 2, 3.
Well, just the width, how they're expressed, the width is varied.
Slightly
Yeah, it's,
different.
each one is,
It's about
what
a
is
couple
that?
of feet difference.
Right. I mean, that, you asked if that bothered, I think it's actually better that it does that.
Why?
Because it doesn't, each one has the specificity of itself.
now, come on now.
no,
So you've got.
You make, everything else is the same.
Entrance, the same garage door, the same everything, and you just decided
And
to
you've
make
got
it.
slight different configuration of windows, because you've got which side you have the glass on, so those things become site specific. I mean, if you do look at the floor plan, you'll see that it's actually, the units are relatively tight. You know,
It's a visual thing, you have to convince us.
I'm not convinced that it's not bigger than most of the other houses. The size of the units is a good size for what the market is. It's smaller than what you're usually seeing. So I appreciate that they're not trying to make the biggest units that they can. I mean, we also have the option here of going with subdivision.
Patty, you can't really say that when you got huge dormers and trying to use an attic space that makes the house bigger.
You're trying to make.
So they're not trying to make it as big as possible, but they're making it as big as possible.
You're making it as useful as possible.
Okay.
Using the space you're creating the most efficient, appropriate way.
I'm seeing, listen, the dormers at the top and the violation of the sky exposure plane it's taking advantage of that.
Okay.
More so than trying to create 3 townhomes in a smaller neighborhood, right, that has smaller buildings. So, that's the opinion that I'm getting based on what's being presented, right? Because just because there's a violation of the sky exposure plan, it doesn't mean try and take more advantage of that violation.
I mean, obviously, we didn't grow one design. One of the things we had was taking this ridge height and making it the ridge height that's between these two, taking this ridge and making it the height between those two. And that these two roofs were based on the depth of the building, so that they were closer to that 3 or 4 to 12 then these are the tenants. I mean, that's something we can certainly take another look at and show and see if that works. That eliminates the gap. Then you don't have the dormers and you don't have the space.
I actually kind of like the building. It's the three separate units, the three separate A-frames are attractive. I'm not too totally opposed to the slight variation of the width and between the three different units. I think my major issue is the roof.
That mass.
Yeah, the mass. If you could address that, you'd go a long way convincingly.
We will look at those as an option. Anything else?
Well, it sounds to me like you are, there's a question of the roof. I'm not clear if you are going to present us a compliant version, sky exposure plane compliant version.
Don't think we're gonna be able to do a compliant sky exposure plane. I think what we can do is we can get it to where the only thing that's in the sky exposure plane is portions of this gable form. So that none of
That
this
would be,
mass.
okay, let's look at that. I think that's, right, that's something we can work with.
Yeah, if we were going to, if the most important thing was the sky exposure plane, I'd go for the other option and run the units front to
It's
back.
not the only thing it's
I
not
know.
just make it compliant or not, it's make it
I said,
compliant, if you can't,
That was
we'll,
the big
yeah.
thing, that's what you do. If the real important thing here was that, I'm looking at the street, and I don't see that being a concern. The houses are all violated, and they all look fine, it has a nice character. The original intent of that was a tool to use for assessing if you're gonna be significantly different than your neighbors. Here, we're showing you it's fairly consistent.
All right, so we'll look at what you have at the next meeting.
I'm gonna unplug now.
Pardon?
I'm gonna unplug now.
At least for one.
Let's,
I know you have another thing that's.
I just want to see if there are any neighbors here that have anything. No neighbors?
Where do you talk now? You can stand by that, Mike,
There's,
if you want.
Steve Tilley, 22 Elm Street. I guess I'd just leave a question for Patty, since we worked so hard on, and for the board, we worked so hard together on creating contextual zoning, a long time ago. And the diagram on this street looks like the cartoons of non-contextual zoning, of the big house problem, right? So does that suggest that there's a problem with the zoning that needs to be addressed? And I guess, partly, addressing it at Patty, because I would say it was a commission that I wouldn't take on, but it's also a commission that shouldn't be possible given what we were all recognizing as the cartoon-like, implications of what's apparently compliant zoning. So I just, for the future, I think as we start looking at this again, or as you start looking at it again, it just.
I think that's a very good idea. I present before Greenwich, Scarsdale. They all have attic laws where it was a effect from the quote-unquote McMansions. And if you look at their laws, you would never be allowed to do any of this.
Yeah.
You would never be allowed to do this. The 34 feet or 35 feet to the center line is a joke.
Yeah.
And
So-
that's
That's
why
what
we're
the code
seeing
says.
what we are seeing, because it simply is not contextual.
Yeah. So, the sky exposure plane was really an invention that happened later because we didn't want to have FAR. In other words,
And that's the other problem.
it's not about
You have
geometry.
to have one or the other.
It was a mass reduction technique. It wasn't about, also partly because people's light and air were being excluded by new buildings next door. So I would just think that it's something to pause on. Personally, I think the three gables, some kind of indentation between the three gables, both front and back, because this building looks like a single building in the back, but, you know, you've got three nice gables on the street, that's great. But anyway, so, I mean, I would do three gables with mega crickets, you know,
Well,
but,
that was what I was kind of saying, if I took those ridges across, they're better than crickets, they'd be like a 4 and 12 roof pitch.
right. And, you know, there's also nothing wrong with chopping the top off. You can get, you know, Italianate houses have flat
Yeah,
sections on the top, but,
it's the only way you can build an urban.
but the bigger question is really the contextual zoning one.
We are discussing now.
Thank you.
Make a motion, we continue this to the next meeting. Second, need a second? Continue. Thank you. 41 Cedar Street, please. Yes, please.
Good evening, my name is Cosmo Marchioni, I'm the owner at 41 Cedar Street, I'm also the president of the BEC Group. This is the first time I'm addressing the board, so I just want to introduce myself and our company a little bit. I live in Pleasantville, New York, with my wife and our 2 little kids. I've been around here for the last 20 years. After college, I decided to reside in Westchester, and I've joined the BEC Group. BEC Group is a company that's been around for the last 100 years in some shape or form as consultants or developers, GCs, and the latest now, we're doing a lot of work that we're in Westchester County, in the Capital District area mostly. Today with me, I have our design architect, Christina Griffin, and Suzanne Levine from CJ Studio. I also have Sina Ghaznavi from Zero Cool Multimedia production company that is going to share with you VR experience that we put together for the board. And tonight, pure and simple, we're asking for your approval and recommendations to the town board for this project. So I appreciate ahead of time, I thank you ahead of time for your patience as we go through all the work that we've done for this project. Thank you very much. So, I guess Suzanne, or Christina,
Christine Griffin, principal of Studio.
Christina, you can't hear me.
Okay, I'm going to try hard to find these, I don't think there's a mic, and it's not my native. It's loud, but I'll try. So we have been, our firm has been studying these sites since October 2018. We started out by looking at a, 4-story building, we looked at a 1-story with a 5-story behind, we looked at 3-story with walls. We were in front of the Board of Trustees in 2018, and then after that, we went on a long venture to look at different options. The project was put on hold for a little bit because there was some additional property that was added to the site. And then we submitted our drawings to the planning board. A few months ago, we were at, we actually went back to the Board of Trustees earlier this year. Then went to the planning board for 3 meetings, and we received their recommendation to go to the Board of Trustees, recommendation for approval. So now we're here at our technical meeting. We have quite a number of drawings we're going to show you. First, take you through our drawings. So I'd like to introduce Sina from Zero Cool. Yes. And he's going to
Hi, everybody.
take you through this.
It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Sina Ghaznavi. We're going to do a VR experience. Just a little context before we jump in here. We knew that there was a lot of concern about what the feel was like of the building on Cedar Street. So we wanted to make sure that our representation was as accurate as possible. So we took the data from the survey the architects did, and we were able to accurately show the height of the building as compared to the rest of the street. And we also tracked the sun. The Naval Observatory has an open API, which is a fancy way of saying they let us look at their data, and we can track the sun and how it moves during a day. So you'll see how it feels and how it fits in with the rest of the street. So, moment here.
I'm gonna volunteer you. Next.
I'm in. I've used this
You used it.
Yeah, we VR'd it. From my project, we VR'd the entire OR.
It's it.
And then mine. In March.
Okay.
Oxygen tank, isn't it?
And Christina will narrate as I go and tell me where to go and such. Thanks.
I asked Sina to try to give us a walk through the downtown, starting at one end of Main on the east side, and walking down to the
The street's not that
Lower.
long.
allowed. I
The
asked,
street's not that long. It's not
We
that
all
long.
know what Cedar Street looks like. Let them do the presentation.
actually, I think, one thing I wanted you to know, that we decided that we would do a walk through the downtown, so we could see the buildings along Cedar Street, and then go up to the church property, turn around, come back, and then walk around the building. Now, I think Sina also wanted to tell us how he came up with buildings that he has, because he's working with survey and a lot of the measurements that we gave him.
Yeah, one of the
And,
things, oh, sorry. One of the things I was able to do was come up to Cedar Street a couple times and use a 360 camera to really take an accurate look on everything that was there. Obviously, we didn't put a ton of detail into a lot of the other elements of the street, but we were able to kind of get the feel of everything. And as you can see, we got the metal frame that's here, and then we also put these little areas here so you can see what time of day we're looking at here. Yeah.
But Sina, maybe you can tell us, how did you come up with the size and shape of the building, the height?
Oh, this is all based on your architectural drawings and the survey data that we used. We imported SketchUp and, make sure that everything was to scale properly, so it fits properly within the rest of the measurements here.
So as you're down Cedar Street, we'd like to show you as you're walking down, you see, I just want to start back a little bit more
Oh, okay.
towards Broadway. You can see there's the 5-story building at the very end, there's a 3-story building, and then there's several 1-story buildings. And then if you continue, you'll see the theater building, which has a 1-story facade in front, and about a 41-foot high top of roof building in the back, that's the main theater. We see the metal structure with the signage that's there, and then this is the building to the right is what we proposed for the new Cedar Commons. This is a 15-unit mixed-use building, 27,000 square feet. The building, we broke it into pieces, so the first building you see is stepped, because we're trying to create transitional building between the 3-story and the 1-story facade. And then you see the 3-story building that is a flush facade, which is a red brick building next to it. Now, I'd like to continue down the street. A lot of the buildings may be not accurate architecturally, but one thing we did is I know that Sina focused on getting our proposed building as accurate as possible. Here, driving down the road. So maybe we can just continue down the street.
You wanna go up the driveway here?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a continuous wall of facades, and then it ends here, and there's a break, and there's the existing driveway here going up to the church. I want to just go back up to the church. And then I would like to turn around and look back at the building. So we've been asked to really study and see the relationship of this building with the church property. Because, at the end of this stretch of mixed-use buildings, all of a sudden you have this green space and this beautiful church. What we're looking at here is the green space that exists. These trees are a simulation of what exists based on photographs. And this is the three-story building, and as you can see, it's tucked into the hillside. Now, I wanted to go closer to the building, go to the front entrance, and take a look at our street facade. Yeah, that would be nice. Now, the design of this building is based on the idea of traditional storefront architecture and downtown architecture. We have storefront bays, lots of glass to display. They're 12 feet wide, they're similar to a lot of downtown. We took advantage of the fact that this is at the end of a long row, contiguous buildings with a few alleyways to create a corner element, especially there's also a little bend in the road. And just to the right of that, we've designed a pocket park because we want to give more opportunity for activity and lots of life and outdoor type activity around the building. And you'll see, looking straight down, is past this little pocket park is just an opening that provides egress and also light and ventilation for the windows for the units on that lower level. Just to the right is the existing pillar. This is the pillar that exists. And what we're planning to do, have a new retaining wall that's going to tie into the old stone wall that's there. And then I'd like to just walk around the storefront so they can get an idea of what the storefront feels like. Our goal is to provide an opportunity for really lively storefronts so that there's this indoor-outdoor connection, a lot of visibility of the activity going inside. It's a little under 2,000 square feet of commercial space, but it's broken up into 4 facades, but realistically, probably it would be 2 retail units in there. We have a nice lower cornice and surface-mounted light fixtures, vertical signs, or we could even use the band and the frieze board as a sign band. Above that, we're treated the upper 2 stories as residential facade in a very traditional way. There's a lot of really nice brickwork throughout the upstairs, so you can see it's very subtle brick detail in the building. But the building next to it, this one, is actually an entrance to the residential units and also the garage. Above it is residential, and this facade is stepped back so that when you're looking at this, the facade is only 2 stories high from when you're looking up at the sidewalk, and then the 3rd floor is set back. This is to create like a transitional building between the larger 3-story facade and the theater building. And then if we pull back and just see this building, we can look across the street as well because it's always important to see.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I should
Yeah, no,
have
it's
said
okay.
that. To see how this fits in with the mix of buildings that are on the street. There's a 2.5-story building, 2-story across the street, and we're a mix of 2, maybe 3-story or 2.5, and then some 2-story buildings. And then there's some green space.
A lot of different trees on Cedar Street, so we did our best.
Yeah.
I can go up,
So maybe we can also go up on the church property and see if we can see the back. 'Cause I know at the planning board meeting, the pastor and some board members were wanting to know what the impact of the building would be on this property. So this is looking back at the property. I mean, the hill rides up, and even though there is a opening that provides, there's like an alleyway around the building, there is already an existing clustering of trees and shrubbery here. So this is just showing you sort of the big picture, hopefully helping you see what it would feel like in this neighborhood with this building in place. We can show you any views that you might like to see, but we're gonna end this little visit and then move on to our 2D drawings.
Oh, we can go
Yeah,
through
why
some
don't we just show,
Yeah.
what's interesting is to look back and maybe show a nighttime view. Can we
Yep.
do that? Because
So, sorry.
we're hoping that it's gonna be, we want it to be really well lit at night so that you have a lot of activity and.
This is 8 a.m. We're at noon. 3 p.m. 6 p.m. 9 p.m. and then. Okay.
That is wild.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Oh, let me make sure.
You just gotta get set up here.
Cool. Very cool.
Okay, so this is the rendering that our firm prepared to show just our favorite view of the building. And I'm going to show you, starting with the simple site plan, how we developed these ideas. We started with, of course, looking at photos of the neighborhood. These images, this first one is just showing the mix of different heights along Cedar, where you have tall building right here on Broadway, 5 stories, 3 stories, 1 story, 1 story. This is the 1-story building with the theater building behind it. And then we have our site, which is a 1-story building that has four commercial units and a 3-story, three residential units and the house that's behind it. This is looking down the street to show looking the other way. This is our site, 1-story building, 2-story behind it. This was like a pattern that we saw in Dobbs Ferry in different places where sometimes there would be an old house behind and commercial storefront along the street. And then just the different views. This is another view looking at the building that we're going to replace, the theater building next to it. And this is just looking the other way. And this is a very important view because you know that as you go down the street, you see that view of the church, and we want to make sure that you're conscious of that. We also looked at images of the original buildings in the downtown. We just wanted to get a feeling for how Dobbs Ferry was originally designed around anywhere from 1890 to before the Depression. This building, this 1-story building, This is on the other side of the theater building that has a house behind it. This is a similar pattern to what exists on 41 to 45 Cedar Street. And then, you know, a lot of the original designs of the downtown buildings have these really lovely storefronts with, especially this is a 75 Main with the high storefront windows, residential facade, and then a corners at the very top. And there's a mix of 1, 2, 3, and 4-story buildings. This is current views of downtown Duxbury, 75 Main, beautifully renovated with a 2-story building next to it. 3-story buildings along Main Street. Also on Main is like 2, 3, and 3-story buildings. There's a mix, a range of different kinds of buildings. Duxbury is also on Main. Also different floor to ceiling. There's quite a variety. Then we also looked at, for inspiration, we found were outstanding examples of downtowns, and we studied different downtowns in the river towns, and especially in Beacon. These are all from Beacon. There's just so many wonderful facades and different, quite a diversity of storefronts, but it's a very similar theme, a lot of variations of the same thing, very high display windows, transom glass, lower cornice, upper cornice, residential windows above the storefront facade. Lots of opportunity for vertical signs and displays. We're outside the area. I think we had took some of these pictures from Brooklyn, some from maybe Rhinebeck. You have these beautiful glass display windows and sign dam with a lower cornice. Different types of different heights of transom windows, different types of signs, vertical signs, horizontal signs, but always very similar thing. You have this storefront facade that's treated in a different way than the walls above. So this is the area map, just to give you just sort of a basic idea of the buildings that are there. There's the on the south side of Cedar Street, starting at Broadway with 5-story, 3-story, and 1-story buildings. We have the theater building, and this is our site here. You can see the shapes of the buildings. There's quite a variety. But you see this, there's a few of these buildings that have houses behind them, and then on the north side we have smaller buildings, but different heights. And then this stretch of practically contiguous walls, which creates like the street wall, ends at the Zion Church property. I just wanted to show you our zoning information because this is an as-of-right scheme. We meet the zoning code in every way in terms of lot coverage. We're at 77%, maximum is 80. We're at maximum pervious coverage at 94, 100% is allowed. We meet all these setbacks to different features. We meet the height requirement is 40 feet to the top of the building, 3 stories. Our bulkhead is 4.4%, we're allowed 3%. And our parking meets the requirements. We have 24 spaces in the garage and 3 outdoor on-street parking. Just to give you an idea of the size of the building, we're proposing that we have 15 units that vary from just under 1,000 square feet for our 2 affordable housing units to 1,700 square feet. They're all 2 bedrooms, 2 or 2.5 baths. We have a common area that is probably going to be a fitness area on the first floor. And we have roof decks above, which I'll show you in a few minutes. This is our site plan. This is prepared by Hilton Engineering. To give you an idea, it's working on the storm drainage plan, which has already been reviewed by Hilton Engineering. This is our landscape plan showing our pocket park that's going to have some plant beds shed areas. We wanted like to have something that ties in nicely with the old stone wall here. Have flower beds, and then we're planning to have a series of retaining walls, which is what creates this opening here for light into the windows of the building, and also helps us make that transition from to the higher grade above. And then we have ground cover and things like that. And this grid that you see is our green roof. The green roof lowers the heat impact of the building, and also will reduce the amount of stormwater drainage demands for the building. And we're planning to have that in the southern end of the roof. These are our floor plans. This is our lower level. The garage is underground. We wanted to, of course, conceal all the parking. So we designed the building for that. Well, the parking will be underground, the driveway will be here. This entrance is here to make sure that we're not more than 75, we're not less than 75 feet from another driveway, which is in the third floor. This lower level allows handicap access to an elevator that has waste recycling areas and a bicycle storage space. On the first floor, we're showing a little less than 2,000 square feet of retail. We're probably going to break that into 2 retail spaces, but with 4 different display storefronts so that they have the scale of a lot of the older storefronts in the downtown. We have an entrance to the residential units next to the driveway, which leads to a lobby. There's an amenity space, there'll probably be a fitness center for the area. There's 3 units on this level. On the next level, we have 6 units with 1 affordable housing unit tucked in here. And on the 3rd floor, it's almost the same layout with affordable housing tucked in here. We're required to have 10% of the units affordable, so we have 2 units. We have outdoor spaces like balconies on the west and south sides of the building, away from the street. At the roof level, we have a common roof deck, about 300 square feet, and then each of these roof decks, we have 5 private lawns with a green roof in the back. This is a HVAC enclosure, Painted AZAC, that we're showing to conceal the HVAC units that will be buried in between the roof decks. This is a section through the building. This is showing our 40-foot height from the sidewalk to the top of the roof. There's going to be a railing that's above that roof, which is allowed by code. This is a wall for the elevator and stair. And this is showing that we are having a ramp go down to the garage, but retail space on the main level on the first floor with units in the back, many of these units, and then 6 units on each floor above, with roof deck on the top. This is our north elevation. This is showing our black and white 2D elevations have all of the notes about materials. And then we're going to have, I'm going to show you colored elevations, which we left the notes off just for clarity. So this is showing our storefront facade. What we wanted to do is treat the building that has the storefront in a slightly different way, different brick color, slightly different cornice details. We have 4 bays of glass. We have a corner piece with a door here. We have multiple doors so that there'd be easy access and opening from the indoor-outdoor activities. We've got spilling out of people and signage and maybe some tables and chairs. This is the entry to the garage, and so our main building is treated slightly different than this building to the left. The difference is I've done a lot of studying of downtown buildings, and I've done 14 buildings in downtown Hastings, and I felt that the building needed to be broken up. so that we wouldn't go beyond a certain length. So at this point, we have a break in the building, and we have a building here that has a facade that's 2 stories high, and then it's set back and has a balcony here to the facade at the 3rd floor. This is our corner facade. We'd like to treat that in a special way, have a glass roof over the front door. All of the facade is treated with muntins and subtle brick detail, similar to what we see in older buildings in the downtown. This is our west elevation, the red brick facade with the gunmetal storefront elevations that ends around here, and then we transition to a more residential facade. Because at the lower level, we actually have 3 units here. These, there are balconies off this elevation because it's away from the street and it's a little more private. This is the south elevation. This is showing a corner piece that'll be brick, red brick, which we'll show you in a minute. And then this is a residential facade with some balconies here and facing the most private area of the site. This is the east elevation because of being close to the lot line. We're only able to put windows in this part of the building. And this is set back so that we can do that and still meet state code for maximum amount of glass here. These are our color elevations. This is showing the storefront facade. It's transom windows. The entire facade is a gunmetal gray. We're planning to have this all painted material. Hold on a second. The exact probably. Above this is our a red brick facade with a higher and upper cornice. So we have a lower cornice, upper cornice, residential facade with pilasters in brick and a brick canopy in the windows. The front door, we have this special glass roof supported with rods. This is a very different treatment where we've got a very cool flat gray brick, which we'll show you in a few minutes. Very similar treatment of the windows. Windows are black and gunmetal gray, detailing around the door to the residential units and the garage. And this is the elevation facing west. This is how we've turned the facade so that the storefront continues up to the end of our pocket park with another door on the end here. We have several doors around this facade. And then we have, we change to the gray detailing and slightly different lower and upper cornices. At the end of the other end of the building, we move back to brick. We want to break up this building to give it a nice sense of proportion and scale. And this is the rear facade, which has just that corner element in the red brick, and the rest is the cool gray. This is just the facade we cut out with the windows and the red brick. Now, we have prepared streetscape elevations so that we can compare the size of the proposed building at 45 Cedar Street with the other building on the street, starting with all the way on the end, 381 Broadway, which is 5 stories, 17 Cedar, 3 stories, 19 is a 1-story building with a nice facade with transom windows. 23 Cedars, 1 story. This is the theater building, and you see the building behind. It goes up 1 foot above our, well, actually, I'll show you a blow of this, so you can see that next to the proposed building. This is the existing building right now. It has 4 residential units. There's a center entrance here that separate from the storefronts, and then a 3-story building with 3 units behind. This is our proposed building in place of that, showing 3 full stories, and with the theater building to the left. This is a blow-up. And the theater building, we have the surveyor give us the elevation of the top of the theater building, which is elevation, I think, 212 or 213. Our top of our roof here, not the railing, is 212. It's 1 foot lower than the theater building. Top of our new roof, 1 foot lower. Okay, this is just the same rendering, but with the entire streetscape around it, so you can see the relationship of the proposed building next to the lower buildings going down Cedar Street, the higher building at the end, two-story buildings across the street. It shows the bend in the road, and we felt that it would be nice we have a visual element here, so that it's like an ending for this long facade and a nice feature and focal point for the building. All right, these are just images of the church. We made sure, we made sure that we studied the property, Zion Church property, and you can see this is the house, a 3-story house with a 1-story commercial building in front. This is our site, and this is the church, which is at an angle, sort of askew to our building. This is another view looking at the church. I think these were taken with a drone. And then down here is the view you would see if you're across the street looking at the church, and then this is looking the other way. And I'm only showing you these images because I'm now going to show you our massing studies using the same images. And these studies were done just with general shape of the building without color, just because we were focused more on how the size and shape and proportion of the building would fit in this neighborhood. So we superimposed, the first view is a view from Zion Church showing the 3-story building superimposed on a photograph looking down the driveway. Our second view is looking up the driveway where the building is to the left. And you see the big stone pillar here and the pieces of church. And this is a view when you're looking at Zion Church across the street, looking towards the west, past the corner of the proposed 3-story building. There are a few more massing studies. This one is looking at more of the whole site, looking at the slope in the back of the building. The grade goes up quite a bit there. The theater building to the left. And this massing study number 5 here is showing the church in place. This is based on topographic surveys where we located the church to get the right height on the site next to the building. And we also are showing shapes to represent the different heights of the shapes of the buildings as we go down Cedar Street. Now, we actually looked at different heights and shapes, and one of the general concepts that we liked is that we would create a streetscape and a wall of buildings, which is encouraged by the vision plan in the downtown design guidelines, and that this end of the street could handle a larger building because it gives us a sort of an anchor. This is another massing study. This one is comparing the theater building to our proposed building. You can see the buildings are similar in height, except the theater building has a lower building in front. This is the church beyond. And this is a view additionally looking at the massing and comparing the new proposed building with the church to the right. Okay, now I'd like to just pause and lay on this slide because we'd like to describe the materials and ideas behind the facade. We really looked around for some kind of inspiration. We actually like the variety of brick that we see from downtown Doxbury. There's an iron brick, there's a textured brick, and we felt that brick would be a really great material for this building. And this is just an old factory building that inspired us because we liked the red brick and the texture that it gave, and also it's kind of it adds to the street because of a lot of the brick that's there is different colors. And the cool gray is just a gray the textured brick. We have samples that I can show you that we have with us. Maybe Suzanne can show you. So there's a contrast. The different bricks helps us to break up the mass of the building, but we also wanted to make sure they worked well together, that we had this heavy, wonderful texture, and then we had something that's completely smooth and contrasting with it. And
This is the gunmetal color.
for the facade is a gunmetal gray that we want to have a little blue in, so it's not too drab, too dark.
And the upper windows have a black color. And this is just for the fixtures, the light fixtures and accents.
So are the bricks set in a prefabricated panel that goes up, or are they hand-laid bricks?
Actually, so far, we are looking at a 4-inch brick that has different relief to it. And we're still developing those details, but not prefab. This is a Conair metal window, gunmetal color, and these are Marvin windows with black, Marvin integrity windows with black cladding. We also have our cornice, well, here's our electrical plan, which we reviewed with the planning board, but these are some of the light fixtures. We'd like to have a little bit of a clean look to some of the features, not to be totally traditional. And here are our details of the upper cornice, which is larger than the lower cornice. It just has nice crown molding details, both as frieze boards. I actually studied a lot of downtowns, and very impressed by Kingston especially, because it felt like it feels good to have this cap at the top of the building that's higher, that's deeper than the lower cornice. And these are just some details of the, this is our corner detail with the glass and metal, which would be a frosted glass inset in a metal frame with brackets. And just some of the privacy fences that we're going to have over the deck. Now this is our last slide. I had submitted a report about our response to the vision plan and our response to the downtown district building design guidelines. So rather than go through all those points, I just thought I'd ask if you have any questions, because there's we read it thoroughly and went point by point, and we feel that a lot of the ideas in this building fit the ideas in the both the vision and the downtown design guidelines, where we wanted to have a good fit with what exists in the downtown. We wanted to create a street wall. We want a lively storefront. We want lots of glass down here, but cut out windows above. We want some nice cornice details and a lot of the things that really we feel makes this a really dynamic and interesting building that fits this area of Dobbs Ferry. We feel we've incorporated in the design of the building. So if you have any questions.
Yeah, I think I'll, firstly, it's a very thorough and thoughtful design and presentation, so I appreciate that. I think there's also quite a bit here, and many layers of information, some of which you have only just peeled back for me in this presentation. I didn't pick up in the first review of the drawings. So I think that, coupled with our desire to hear neighbors, I think what that means for us, and because we can only meet as a group in this forum, I don't think we'll be making a decision tonight, but I do want to hear from everyone on the dais, and I want to hear from everyone here. So I think let's start with some of the neighbors and community and hear a few of them, hear their thoughts. If there's anyone here that would like to speak, we'll start here and we'll work our way through. You are welcome to use this microphone if you'd like, or you can just speak loudly.
Actually, I'm a preacher.
Oh.
You're gonna hear me. My name is Mary Gramsch. I'm the priest in charge at Zion Episcopal Church, and I am a resident of 55 Cedar Street. I live in the rectory, so I live on the church close. And this is actually the second time I've seen this presentation, and it is very thorough and thoughtful. But I am speaking to you with some concerns about the proposed building for the property adjoining Zion Episcopal Church to the east on several counts, but I'm going to limit it because we've been here quite a while. I'm concerned about the sheer mass of the proposed structure. 90 feet by 115 feet by 40 feet is an enormous structure for our village and would dwarf and loom over the churchyard at Zion Church. It would be the entire depth of the churchyard would be building to the east. And I think the damage done to the sense of peace and oasis that Zion provides for the village would be deep and lasting. I also want to comment on some of the images here show a beautiful screen of trees. Those trees are actually on the property that South Presbyterian Church has sold to this project, and so they would not be there, including an enormous old-growth oak, which is right on the other side of the surveyor's line. I'm also, number two, concerned with the excessive dissimilarity of the proposed building with all three buildings on the church close, not to mention the adjacent buildings on Cedar Street. Zion Church was built in 1833. It's got beautiful large arched windows and fine tracery and stonework, and is utterly dissimilar to the proposed building in both material and architectural sensibilities. A few ornamental flourishes on the Cedar Commons building does not disguise the fact that it is indeed a very large block. If compared to the church, without a lot of grace or openness. The third thing is this proposed building, the loss of human scale and the historic nature of the streetscape on Cedar Street is a grave concern for me. The tearing down of a building that's been part of Dobbs Ferry street scene for 90 years, rather than repairing or repurposing it, seems to me to be both wasteful and short-sighted. We would lose part of our unique identity and history with such a loss. Moreover, permitting a 40-foot building to be built right to the sidewalk would irreparably damage the sense of vista that one gains
as you walk down Cedar Street, you move west on Cedar Street, and it will cause a sense of constriction just where the Cedar Bend happens. I have other concerns, but this is a brief forum, but I do appreciate the time and that you are all taking for this, and I do appreciate the time for the presentation. But I do believe that this, while it's an intriguing project, I think it's in the wrong place. Thank you.
I'm Angela Devlin, 7 Keller Lane here in Dobbs Ferry. I wanted to provide on behalf of residents here in Dobbs Ferry and surrounding towns a petition that has been signed by people who are opposed to this particular development in line with some of the concerns that were raised by the church community and beyond. I don't know who we provide these to or if they're relevant for this forum, but I have them and wanted to be able to hand deliver them. So I don't know if there's one of you that I can...
leave it with that, yeah.
Okay, great. The two questions that I have, I'm sorry?
Probably go to the board of trustees.
Okay, great, thank you. The two questions that I have and might ask for this group to explore. One is actually where the traffic would go for the parking for the building, should it be approved? And moving just the traffic in Cedar Street and trying to have residents in a 15 unit building making a left into that area will create further congestion on a street that already experiences that. The other is that I'm not sure I personally understand and would be interested in knowing the actual demand that actually exists for this building to be built in terms of whether or not there's actually a residential demand for this. And then the final and third point for me is wanting to really think about, I get the opportunity for the developers, but I'm not sure I fully understand the opportunity for our commercial district of Dobbs Ferry for this particular building to be in this particular space. Because of just, pardon me?
I do understand.
The opportunity for the commercial district of Dobbs Ferry for this particular building in this particular space. We're displacing existing businesses to build this building, and should it be approved, and to then create 2 new commercial spaces and all of this residential, space that I'm not sure is needed. But the other thing that is the disruption around, I don't know how long it's going to take to build the building, so there's a lot of information I don't have, I'll be honest, and I'd be interested in learning. But the consideration, again, just being a small village, something of this magnitude will take some time and will have a direct bottom line commercial impact to our business owners in this area. So I would think that should it be considered for moving forward, that there needs to be a really clear plan for how we're going to protect our existing business owners, in addition to the ones that we already know would be displaced should this be approved. So I just have a concern for the commercial district and the existing business owners there. So that's just my thoughts as a resident, and I wanted to just maybe share those for your consideration. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Barbara Dannenbring, and I just want to say that bit by bit we're changing Dobbs Ferry, and I want to know if that's the will of the people who pay taxes or who live here now. Because I would like to know what the plan is for the rent, or the buying. I guess it's going to be a condominium.
Yes.
So what are you planning for that to be? Can you say that?
I'm not sure what the question is. What do you
How
call it?
much are you charging for the, for each?
It'll be comparable to the lost project. Yes.
75 million.
75 million, yes.
Okay, so what is that? Could you just give me?
I'm sorry, this is a forum for a comment,
Okay.
but not
that's
for
all-
a conversation
that's my comment.
between.
I don't know if we want to change so that people can't afford to live here. And they mostly can't anyway if you don't have quite a bit of money. But anyway, that's all.
Thank you.
My name's French Conway. I'm just a resident here in town, a block or so away from where this would go up. My only comment, it looks like half a dozen factory conversions that I've seen. It looks like a warehouse. It's a monster. It's not in keeping with the rest of the village. It diminishes to a great degree the charm that Cedar Street has by being a small street. It's not appropriate for this town.
Yes, please.
Yeah, hi. My name is Terry Lucas, and I'm sorry, I don't know where to go.
You should, wherever you like.
But, oh, here? Hi, my name is Terry Lucas. I'm a resident of 55 Cedar Street. I live in the rectory. And I'm looking at this. You know, I come from the Lower East Side. And you know what this looks like to me? It actually gave me a pang of nostalgia and homesickness. Looks like the Rivington Street Market. Yeah, that's exactly, looks like a city building. So, you know, I was like, oh, Baba. I used to go to the Rivington Street Market with my grandmother. So the point is, though, that I don't think that Rivington Street is consistent with a bucolic, working-class village. And I realize this is not a time for a debate or a conversation, but I wonder, when you say it's comparable to, the lofts on 75, what does that mean in dollars? What does that mean in dollars?
Well,
May I ask? I'm sorry, it's one question that I would like to have an answer
It's
to.
not a relevant question to the.
I think it's a relevant
No,
question
no,
because
to
you're
this
talking
board.
about the character and the consistency of the community as well as an architectural span.
Well, I think that the question is not an irrelevant one. However, the question of the market here is not really what we address. We address the question of aesthetics. And so your first point, I think, is very well taken, and we are two very similar opinions. But questions of macroeconomics are just way above the questions that our board addresses.
So the planning board is only for aesthetics, it's only for the purpose of physicality? It's not about the community or the continuity of community here?
I wouldn't make that harsh distinction, no. It is also about the community, because aesthetics are about conforming to a community will, and so they are about community, but this is not a board that deals with that kind of thing. That's my point.
Board of Trustees does.
That's right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
My name is Noah Strote. I speak as not a longtime resident of Dallasbury, but as someone who is a new arrival. I arrived here with my wife and son in May, and we were deciding where to live and looked at a lot of different places, and one of the things that attracted us to Dobbs Ferry was the historic charm and in particular of Cedar Street. We ended up living on Main Street, but I am always walking up Cedar, and I love the view that I get, and I love in particular this stretch of properties past the church, and in particular this site is home to two of my favorite businesses that I frequent all the time, and it's really one of the things that would keep me here. So I think looking at this, and again, I like everyone else, I was quite impressed by the presentation style, very thorough. But I don't know if I would have moved here if this kind of building had proliferated earlier. So that's all I wanted to say.
No, I just wanted to comment that the sheer mass of this particular physical structure replaces Zion Church as the anchor of Cedar Street. I just didn't want that to go unnoticed. It shifts the focus from Zion Physical Church to commercial property.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Should we start? Anyone else? Let's move on to. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to close comments from neighbors so that we can hear from the board and possibly some questions to the applicant.
I agree with Michael's first comment that there is a lot to digest. And second is the great presentation, very clear. I enjoy very much all the vision plan and downtown district design guidelines, that they were properly presented and properly commented. Finally, someone's reading the guidelines and looking at them. They are for a reason. And the second thing is, I would appreciate if we can have a walkthrough at the Zion Church. I've never had a chance to walk the grounds, and it will be an opportunity.
You're always welcome, especially on Sunday morning.
Thank you. I will be very interested in looking at the relationship of this type of structure to the grounds and to the street. The virtual reality explains a lot, and clearly there are a lot of massing considerations that we need to address. I need to be convinced about what it means sheer mass, that you mentioned. A three-story building on a main street is not what I call sheer mass, but I'm more interested in the relationship to the grounds of the church, because it's very special, and it's a very special condition that needs to be addressed. There is the concerns of traffic, but I think that everybody's aware of that. I'm not sure about the change of materials on the front elevation, maybe at the back. The relationship of the entry, let's say, to the residential building is kind of quaint. Or let's say that the entrance to the parking is more prominent than the entrance to the building. So, and I particularly, I'm not opposed to the character of the building. I understand that the look that they're trying to achieve is of a loft conversion, that I agree with you, it might be something to consider. It's not, I'm not entirely, I need to think about it. And there are more comments that I have to think more about it and elaborate my take on this. We just got this package on Thursday. We had the opportunity to review it like for a few hours, and it's one of these projects that deserves consideration, serious considerations, because it affects not only the street but the village character. You know, I'll keep it at that for now.
I think like I appreciated the presentation. I think it was definitely very thorough. I also, being on the board for, I don't know how long now, this is the first time I've had someone actually take the vision plan and guidelines from the district and put response to each of those items, which I thought put a lot of things into perspective a little bit in terms of what was designed here, without the need for variances and things of that nature, and as of right, right? So I think that combined with what I think is a pretty tasteful design in comparison to some of the other buildings in town, right, is something to consider. So, you know, I don't know what retail properties or what would be there, whether there's restaurants that are planned as opposed to just commercial and retail and things of that nature, but you know, I definitely like some of the elements in terms of creating the alleyway with some seating areas and things of that nature to give, you know, there's not much of that in downtown in terms of being able to kind of sit out and congregate with fellow people within the community, right? So that creates something that I think would be beneficial to the village. But it is a lot of information to take in all at once, so I'm going to continue to review it and better understand the entire intent of the plan.
Firstly, I'd like to make a few comments about the building itself, and then I'd like to speak a little more broadly about the meaning and implication, larger meaning and implication of the project. I think that the main building is done well. There are some details that I find a little lacking. I think that, firstly, the storefront proportion relative to the other storefronts is off. I think it is correct in the building itself, but I worry quite a bit about the very large jump in height of the storefront. And it's hard to tell from your streetscape elevation, because I think some of that finer scale detail is missing, but I think it would be valuable for us to look at your storefront relative to the music storefront and the next one, the Magic Store, whichever comes next. I also the way that the entrance again to the such a large building, the entrance to the driveway, kind of grand arched entrance, and then the entrance to the building itself kind of discreet. And I understand the discretion part, but I don't know, there's something unbalanced about that. I also think that there's this desire sometimes in a larger building to break it apart, and while I find that sometimes useful, and I find that successful where you go from the next door to this building and there's a setback and that sort of eases the transition. I think that's successful, but I'm not so sure about the transition of the brick color. I think that other examples of this haven't, in theory it makes sense, and in practice it doesn't work out so well. So I think that's a question that should be considered a little more. Maybe maybe there is a difference in the types of coursings or the degree of ornamentation of the brick that you're using, and that's how you distinguish rather than color. But I think that's a finer scale. And then I think that the setback on the side, alongside the alley, I don't know what you're calling that, the walkway, that is an intriguing idea, and I think is going, or could potentially be a very valuable part for residents in the rest, if there's a cafe or restaurant in that corner, to capitalize on that for some outdoor seating. So I would urge you to enlarge that to some degree. So that's, I wanted to address your presentation because it deserves it, and the design work, but I think there's three concerns that are raised by the community, and ones that I think are on our mind. The first is that we're demolishing some buildings that some people believe are worth keeping. The second is that we are replacing a fairly quaint massing with a much larger one, and that is really the key to the third one, which is what does that do to the view of the church on Main Street, which I would argue is one of just a very small handful of the best buildings in the village. And then conversely, what does that do for the church community's view back out? A little bit less concerned with that second question. I know you are concerned with that question, but I'm thinking about a broader audience. I think that to address the first question, which is, are the buildings there worth saving? It is a tricky question because I don't think the buildings are charming in some respects, partly due to their humbleness and their sort of relative shabbiness, but they are not masterpieces of architecture by any stretch of the imagination, and so I am reluctant to save something only because it's old. I am fully behind saving something because it's valuable for a number of other reasons, both historically and as part of a context of history, which is not the same thing as architectural masterpiece that needs to be preserved, but what is the story that those buildings potentially tell? So I think those are all questions that we as a group want to discuss and also want to hear from others about. The question of the massing, I think, requires a little more absorption on my part, and I think it warrants a visit. It won't be on Sunday morning, but I will come shortly, and we are, if someone from the architects team or developers team would like to come with us, we can make an arrangement through the village. I think that would be useful for us. We'll have the drawings with us, but some context is always helpful. And so I think we'd like to continue discussing the first issue, the value of the existing buildings and whether they should or whether they can be demolished, and then this other question about the massing and the views. So until I have a better understanding of those three questions and a strong opinion about them, I'm going to withhold saying anything more about them for now.
I actually really appreciated Ms. Griffin's comment on creating a street wall. I think when you have a street of a certain width, there's a pleasantness to having a wall that kind of encloses that street. Europe does this very well. The United States does it very poorly. And I think that Dobbs Ferry has some incredible potential along those lines. And I think that's, there's a lot of parts of Cedar Street that are underscaled. And I appreciate the fact that someone has the wherewithal and willingness to make our downtown more attractive, because our downtown, if you look at the various business districts up and down the river towns, I think ours is the least attractive by far, by a lot. And so we have a long ways to go. And it's going to take a lot of energy. I think burying power lines is important. I think refurbishing a lot of buildings is very important, and maybe creating some new buildings like this one. I also like how the street wall kind of folds into the alleyway, and how that fold creates that kind of flourish, that corner, which when I first saw it, I have to admit, it made me swoon a little bit, because it's pretty and it's well done. I appreciate the discrete parking entrance and the fact that all the parking is below grade. That's great. I do think that the two-tone brick and the discordant style of the building, particularly along Cedar Street, is a bit off-putting to me. I'm not sure if I understand it. You know, when you're creating a building of like a faux vintage building, which is what this is, which I think that particularly in villages like this, a lot of people do, because there are architectural review boards, and there's character of the street and character of the village. I think a lot of people fail creating these faux vintage buildings. I think with the cornice and the shape and a lot of the details that you put in, I think from the looks of it, from this cartoon drawing, you have succeeded very significantly initially, but you know, you've also I think you have to really come through with materials. And you've got to spend some money on materials to actually make it look good. And if you're willing to do that, it's going to be great. If you're not, it's not going to be great. God is in the details.
I just want to pick up. I want to just pick up on something that Mike about the historic value of what's existing and what's and the architectural relevance of safekeeping what's existing. And I don't think that the preservation is of architecture, but the preservation is of, I just say cafe latte because
we like to go there.
Because not only because we like to go there, but it's because it represents an authentic experience of what a cafe lounge is. And my fear is that the proposal reflects you call it faux vintage, that is replacing something that we have that is authentic, and being replaced with something that is trying hard to be old or replicated. That is, I'm not sure it is replicable, but you know, life goes on, and we have to move on, and there is development, and there is density, and there is economics that needs to be met, and density in the downtown, and a lot of other issues that somewhere along the line we have to pay a price. But that said, another thing to consider.
I think it was a great presentation, and the virtual was very clear. It really was. It's like not. I think the entrances need a little bit of help, but the rest of it, I'm gonna hold my comments until I do the walkthrough.
He's got VR, we can do a walkthrough right now.
And, no, I think
Last
that's
presentation,
going.
let's go for it. You guys want to
What
take
was
this?
your-
We got 3 kids at home.
I have a question. We're gonna look at the front door.
Yeah.
We're gonna look at maybe doing a rendering with all the same color, but is there anything else we should be looking at other than those 2 things for the next presentation?
I'll go over a couple of my comments. I think one would be to look at the varying materials and/or brickwork as a technique for differentiating the massing. I think there's some very rich details in some of the photographs presented of storefronts with, I think most of them were in Beacon. I think maybe that's the next sort of round of looking at how that sort of finer scale works its way into that lower section.
Right.
And maybe it's there and it's just, we're looking at a big picture thing and we haven't gotten there yet. I think there's the question about the garage door opening. There's a kind of, I don't know if this is a drawing question or not, but where the arch terminates at the party wall, there's a very skinny little wall there. Something a little funny about it. Perhaps take a look at that, but I think that may be part of looking at the garage door and the lobby entry.
Right.
Maybe those probably wrapped in together. And I guess my other question, just storefront proportion. I've got your Cedar Street proposed elevation, and I can bring this to the street and take a look. I'm just trying to determine if the music building, if the storefront is that rectangle below the sign band. I believe that's what it is, but I think just having maybe we can look at some dimensions or some photos, photo montage, or whatever works for you to represent to us how far off those alignments are, just so that we don't end up with this scenario where we have a very, very big overscaled storefront, followed by a very small one. So, those, and like I said, this storefront is really well proportioned for the building. So that's not so much the issue. My issue is how it carries out down the street. So those would be the questions I'd like to address.
Well, obviously, we're going to try to maximize the pocket, little part. We'll try to maximize the little seating area on the side. Obviously, I think that's a great idea.
That's a successful
Yeah.
take on the proposal, especially,
Exactly.
with turning the building and taking advantage of that.
Right.
Christina, did you try to maybe enter the building from the alleyway, or what do you call it? The main entrance of the building from the side instead of from the front?
Make sure I understand what you're saying.
Coming in from the alley.
You mean coming from this side? There's a door, there, actually,
I'm saying the main door of the building, just because there is something
to
that.
the residence.
Yeah.
I see.
Not to the, I'm just saying that to maximize the retail
We don't want to make the retail too big, because then we wouldn't comply with parking. So we just want to make sure that,
Say it again?
we don't want to make the retail too big. 'cause
No,
then
no,
we
I'm just
won't
saying,
comply with
just,
parking.
you can't go too much bigger because you have the entry to the parking. So I'm just saying that there is something about the access to the building, the residential access to the building that just doesn't work in this proposal. It's too hidden.
Well, we'll look at that. I mean, we looked at the sign.
You know, I've, a lot of, well, we don't necessarily have to follow the pattern, but there is a very, there's a pattern in downtown buildings where a lot of the entrances to the apartments above are kind of quiet, not always, sometimes. But it's really there because it's, connects into this center core of the elevator.
No, I looked at it, and then if you go from the side, you connect to the same core. There is an
Well, it's
assembly.
longer and it,
Yeah, but, you know, I'm just
I don't know,
curious.
but it's something, I actually thought maybe we, would be nice to see the entrance from the street.
Right.
But-
Right. Okay.
So we have lots of notes of all your comments, and we're gonna consider them
Mhm.
and come back with a response.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Just a side comment, just for the sake of sustainable practices, we don't need this much paper. If we can do 11 by 17 sets, and we get it right, it's like, you know, my opinion. Until, you know, we get clearly better detailing requires maybe less information in a page. But, you know.
Three full-size sets for building department.
Yeah, when we get to the building department, but for me, I don't need so much paper. I appreciate it, though.
No, I mean, we just want to be able to read the notes, at least that's what Ed Mailing always says that's important, and we didn't, so, but in the future, we'll make them small.
No, it's my opinion.
I think that's fine. The 11 by 17s. We were talking about bringing our iPads in.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get to that.
Thanks, dear.
We
can bring everyone a headset next time.
So this is an application that our board has, correct? Or is this a? Okay. I'm going to continue this to the next meeting, second, right, in seconds.
Have you given thought to when the next meeting's going to be?
I don't give any thought to that. It is, I am assigned to the next meeting.
I think it's the 11th, which is Thursday. And what you could think of doing is putting one meeting with the next week instead of having the meeting in the week.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, we can consider that with the building department.
Okay, just, it's getting in another meeting. Yeah. We'll speak to the building department. Where's everyone going? It's 100 Main Street.
Because it's definitely a bigger than the 11 and it's Thanksgiving.
You gotta realize, I don't get to have a headset. This is really slow. The entrance to the building, the last section of brick, so it's the narrow section, and single to the width of the entrance. It either does something like that fan button, then the garage brick, it's narrow, so it just becomes an arch, then it sets that back like 2 feet. Then you have 2 corners on that, which I think would really balance nice. That'd be good.
That's a good idea.
Say something.
Steve.
She always does exactly.
We'll start in just a moment.
No rush.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
No private.
Just thought maybe it was a section I wrote.
Why don't you bring it over? Why don't they sitting there?
Because those are old. I mean, that one is kind of what we got to, but I have enough things. I came one meeting in June, and we were coming back the next meeting on July 8th. And we haven't done a lot on the agenda until now. So we haven't made any progress from that. We were carrying over a meeting, but you guys were gonna give us some reactions to what we had asked you at the second meeting in June. So I'm just looking for what you came back with those ideas.
So this is the first time we see this?
This is changed a little bit, but only from the comments that I got from Mike after you guys had that private meeting before.
What's the private?
Yeah,
Well,
we had
the applicant wasn't
The door
invited.
were open.
Yeah, but if I give a party and I don't tell you where it is, you know.
But it was published in the enterprise.
Yes.
Was
Yes,
it?
it was published, it was published in the enterprise. How much of that small print do you read?
I read it.
Yeah.
All right. We, go ahead. Sorry for the delay. Thanks for your patience, everyone.
So, I'm gonna kind of pretend that it's July 8th, because our last time before you was at the June meeting. We had carried it over specifically to give you guys a chance to react to some of the questions that we had. And we were going to come back at that July 8th meeting and get that information. Unfortunately, we didn't get placed on the July 8th meeting because we hadn't submitted anything new. We hadn't submitted anything new because we hadn't gotten responses yet. You then had a meeting with the Board of Trustees where you discussed the ideas of the fourth story, and Michael was nice enough to stop by and kind of fill me in on what that conversation was. At this point, I can't find anything that supports, including conversations with each of the trustees, any support for us to think in terms of a full fourth floor on the existing building. The conversation I've had with all the trustees is that that was not what they came away with, thinking that that's what we would do. I understand the merit of the idea, but if it's not going to be something that the Board of Trustees is willing to do, I don't think it gets us to where we need to be. When we made the presentation on the fourth floor to the Board of Trustees, we pointed out that there's a limit of 50% on fourth floors. We were told that that could be modified, that what we needed to do was specific. In fact, we had shown an 8'5" and a 13'5", I think, setback, and we were specifically told, you need to set back 10 feet.
Those two dimensions are front and side, or side and front, respectively?
Just from Main Street.
Well, why did you say 8.5?
No, 8.5 was what we set back in the middle. This is that actual model that we had at that June meeting. We had showed this setback.
Isn't that the model of the house on the Palisade? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we have one model we use for, and then this is really a nice one. Yeah, if you have a piece of paper, I can show you the museum that we're working at right now. I was in Gary's office and he decided to do a hospital.
It's upside down.
And then, no, this was the hospital, this was the art museum. So this, we were told that this was not something we could do because we couldn't average a setback. We had to have one setback of 10 feet. So that was one thing that we realized we had to do. Although,
just a second, I'm just looking at something a minute ago. The diagram in 300-36 shows 12 feet, although the dimension is equivocal because it appears to have a mark on the outside of the cornice. So I guess we'll call it 10 feet.
We've been told that the requirement is 10 feet. If the requirement...
I was looking for that number. It's not here. I was hoping we could dig it up, but all right, keep going.
Yeah, so what we've done is we have right now kept this as simple as we could, unembellished, undeveloped, not detailed, not trying to be, this is what we think would make it look good in terms of its articulation, but this is what we think the massing could be. That said, we do show the roof lines working. We've also set back on the fourth floor from both sides, symmetrically set back in 2 feet on both sides, so the outside of the, I don't know where my thing went, but he's got a pointer. So the idea is this cornice, here's the existing cornice right now, it comes back to here. We've extended that to the point that this is a simple box. This sets back in 2 feet on the side and across the top. So when you look at the top, it's setting back on both sides. That actually solves one of the problems that the building inspector had, which is that we previously had a gutter on this side, which would be technically over the property next door. While there is a written agreement for that, the owner of the building has changed, so there's some sense that we don't, so why hassle it? We brought that in. One of the comments that we got both from this board and from the planning board was a desire to have the corner turn. One of the fundamental concepts I think that people are working with, I don't think is realistic of what we have before us, which is that we are now significantly touching the front building, and by doing so, can do lots of work on the front building. The economics of this are very marginal if they work at all. We've got 2 existing units above retail that we're going to be coming in and significantly affecting to get 2 additional units. So it's a marginal building. We started with 12, we cut it to 8, we cut it to 6, now we've cut it to 4 in total. So the extent to which we can start doing reworking the corner in significant ways structurally, I don't think economics support it. What we have done is turn the corner, brought the window around, brought that copper cornice that they have around, brought the lights around so that you do have a corner structure for the retail. It's a small gesture. It's one that I think is a positive gesture. I think it helps a little bit. You know, we were approaching this from 2015 on with the idea that we were leaving the front building in place. If you remember, we had a 4th floor, and we were actually, the comments that we got were, particularly from Dwight, the village planner, leave the front building alone, you don't have to spend the money on it, you can put your money in the back. We're not there anymore. So we're trying to do with where we've been led so that we can make something work and something that makes sense and that is not terribly expensive to do, because we are at this point restoring the existing garage, which is going to have a cost to it that doesn't necessarily balance in the value that we're creating for the project. So those are the economics we're dealing with. We have kept this very, very simple, which was another comment actually that this board had, was instead of having, if you remember, like.
No, it's, you know, we're gonna get T-shirts and put them on when you walk in.
What are the T-shirts?
Make it simple.
Okay.
We know, yes, and I appreciate that.
Okay.
I can see that it is lacking in a lot of the kind of overabundance of forms and or materials
that we had previously. So that's where we are, this, again, pretending that this is July 8th. Have we addressed the comments that we got at that meeting?
Yeah.
Is there a question?
No, we were just kind of clarifying a few items.
Is it information that would be useful for the applicant?
No, I think it's just a clarification of what the code says about the 4th floor, which
Yeah.
I wanna have those very clearly defined, partly because my opinion differs about what would be best for this site.
Yes.
From what the code says, and bridging that gap is, you know, it seems like isn't gonna happen. But knowing where the line is important for me before I
think right now, I mean, I was very impressed with Christina's presentation. My take on that was that she was doing probably 95% of the stuff that I would hope someone would do, reinforcing the street line, all that. The reality, though, is we're in a village right now that has a lot of questions that may not be, they might simply be questions. They're not reasoned, they're not based on any kind of a logic or factual information. There are things that people say, and the next thing you know, everyone thinks that 2 stories would be the best. instead of 3, and certainly instead of 4. So I think I don't think the Board of Trustees, too bad that Vinnie's not here tonight, I don't think they have the sand to say we're going to allow this building to come forward and have a 4th-story building and just do that. The other challenge we have is we have as much square footage that I think there's a number that you can't exceed in the sale of these units. And so if we add more square footage, unless we increase the number of units, we're not really we're just building more. We're not making more, which I think becomes a problem for this project. Because the owner of this building is not, he's allowing this to proceed. He will decide what he wants to do once we're done. So he's not sitting there saying, I need this, don't need that. He's basically saying, this is real different than 12 units. So that's one of the reasons I'm trying to keep the materials simple, keep the amount of work being done in the front building simple, and see if there's something that works out with that we can actually then make happen. So I guess it comes down to this being our interpretation of the comments that we got at that June meeting, augmented with the conversations that we had in July. I realize it's been a long time since then, but I think what was the thing, Dan? We couldn't be on the last meeting because we needed to be noticed.
Right, that it had to be noticed, and then.
Well, we had noticed, and there had only been one meeting since then, but we needed to renotice. The other applications that were similar didn't, but this was perceived as being different, so we did. We renoticed. So this is our next meeting. So are we addressing the concerns that were expressed? Are we in a direction that is the one that you would want us to try and evolve out and come up with the details of how some of this actually works? Or is there something else that you would like us to consider?
I think firstly, it should be said that we appreciate that you have resolved a question that is contentious for a lot of people, which is the structure that you will be converting to a garage in this proposal. Obviously, we had a certain opinion about that, but I still think there's a lot of merit to the other side of the debate in many respects. So I appreciate that. I also, I think we all, even from the beginning, we thought that the massing and the sort of courtyard, the two different buildings was there was something nice about it. So it's nice that you found a solution to that. I think that if the question of adding a story to this is off the table, then we'll work with what is feasible. And I guess my next question would be, given this 50% of total floor area of the lower story, where does that leave you? Does that leave you, this isn't exactly a variance, but you sort of need a variance here.
Well, you don't actually need a variance. In fact, the village code is incredibly well crafted. The people who are involved in that, I give a lot of credit to Steve. They really worked on the idea of design does not always work nicely with a list of rules, that you need to have flexibility. So what the Board of Trustees and the Planning Board will have is the power to waive certain requirements.
Okay.
If doing so would be in the interests of good planning in the village of Dodds Ferry. When we made the presentation about the 4th story and about how, if we're going to do this, we need to have 2 bedrooms and a bathroom on the top floor. And that's this big. It can't be 50% of the existing.
Yeah.
So it was clever. Maura suggested the solution, which is that we just build more out in the back. So if we've got a bigger third floor, we can then have the fourth floor we've shown, because then it would be 50% of the floor below it. I think that's a way of solving a problem in some kind of a mathematical world. But again, unless somebody was gonna say, we want another bump out here of some sort, and we want more square footage because we want to do two more units, I don't think it makes any sense. It's a way to solve a math problem. If it's a way to solve a math problem, then I think the village's waiver powers come in and say, instead of bumping something up for no good reason, simply to make the fourth floor be 50% of the third floor, we are willing to waive the 50% limit and allow you to have this size fourth floor on top of that size third floor.
So are you asking us to make that recommendation?
I don't know if that's a recommendation that you.
Yeah, we're gonna lay off that one.
I worry about you, I worry about you as a board. I worry that you're being put in positions at times that I don't think allow you.
We're not worried about ourselves, so you don't have to worry. No one else should worry about it. Here, let's talk about the design.
Right.
Because I think we're all good at that. We're not really good at village politics.
So your fourth floor right now is more than 50%?
More than 50%.
Okay, and we're gonna, for now, we're gonna assume that it is a possibility. Perhaps it's likely or remote, where that part is irrelevant to us at the moment, that the Board of Trustees has the power and may or may not waive that 50%.
Right, that's a decision they will need to make. Sure. You can make recommendations on the design of it.
Sure.
And they might be willing to listen.
So I think to get to where we want to be, if you have other images, we could just sort of glance at, look around at this, because I want to see this building in a way that it doesn't look like it's eating the other building or like sort of, flopping over the other building. I want it to feel like it is interlocked with the building, like there's some there's a real strong connection, and that the form of the new piece is copacetic to the form of the existing piece. And then once we feel like that is working, then at some later time, we'll talk about what the tectonic of that connection is, but that can happen later. And so I think it would be useful for all of us to just see, we have some drawings, but we clearly have a lot more. So let's just go through them, look at them, talk about them a little bit.
That was definitely my concern, and trying to figure out how to accomplish that. The way I thought makes it have a chance was the idea that we've extended, that right now the existing building ends about here. So what we've done is we've made this dimension such that this dimension is approximately the same. So the amount that we're bumping out set back in 2 feet, and the part that we're rising above set back 2 feet. One plane interlocking this, so it's that clean and that simple. It's, there are a lot of things that can be done that can make it more complicated, but I don't think it makes it better. So I think, and as you can see, the top floor.
The materials that you're using for the, one is the existing stucco, and then the other is
like a platinum. No, it's I would love it to be a metal, but I think what we're metal. But I think what we're probably going to end up in terms of budget is probably going to be a hardy plank. I would go with a shiplap, not a clapboard. So it's like a smooth surface in a dark gray that plays off of it and kind of disappears. There are a number of buildings that are really unfortunate on Main Street, but not bothersome, because the fourth floor sets back a little bit, and it's like a different material. And what happens with your eye is when you're walking up the street, you see the main front, and you read that, and the thing that's on top kind of fades away. If you look at a lot of the kind of interesting historic structures down the Lower East Side, West Side, where they put 1 or 2 stories on top, the success was often that setback and change of materials. So when you would look at the building, you didn't lose the proportions and scale of the original building, you saw that there was something on top of it, and you could kind of pay attention if you wanted, but you didn't have to. It wasn't in your face. So keeping this clean and simple, large expanses of glass, the windows, you know, up at the top, taking advantage of pretty cool views of the river. Seems like it gives some amenities and value. The units are good size. I mean, they're actually bigger than what I would normally be trying to do. I mean, an answer to an earlier question was, why would we want to be doing this in Dobbs Ferry? Why would we want to have more places for people to live? Why would we want to have more places for people to buy if they're gonna even pay a lot of money for it? We're desperate in Dobbs Ferry right now with our tax base. Our taxes on single-family homes are unsustainable. When we did the study.
Yeah, no, we're that's not a question, that's not a conversation here.
But it merged, but the 50 buildings we picked out, renovated in Dobbs Ferry, doubled the value of the downtown, and reduces the price, the taxes on single-family homes by 1/3.
Yeah, we all understand the question
So
of
this
density
is
and why
one
it's
of those
valuable.
50
But that's not a free pass to make, you know, bad new buildings or big ugly buildings.
Not,
We just,
not,
you know,
but
so
it's
we
a
get
re-
it.
But it's a reason to renovate existing buildings that are underutilized and add additional units and make more places for people to live, particularly in the downtown, where the only solution really for those stores is more feet on the street. It's not better advertising.
You're preaching the choir here.
Well, you're a very small choir, and usually when I'm talking about this stuff, people disagree.
We still have the preachers.
However, coming back to something that you said, that just because the math gives you the ability to put more mass on it, where is aesthetics in this mass? I mean, if you did 40 DeVoe as a 12 on 12, because you're allowed to do it, the mass is gonna be even bigger. I mean, don't you, as a designer, want to design something that's
The change to the 10.
that has nothing to do necessarily with just because you're.
No,
allowed
that's
to
why
do
he's
it?
talking about density, because he's
Well, no, but
interested in
that's also-
density. He's
but-
interested in programming the downtown. He's
But
not interested in the, he's not
Aesthetics.
as interested,
No,
which is
I
why we're
totally-
telling, which is why we're always
No,
I'm
I
arguing.
think that should be a
totally
balance.
interested in the aesthetics, and to take your point, and to answer it, the 10 and 12 was not to get more space, the 10 and 12 looked better.
Well, we gotta be at 100 Main Street right
Let's
now.
go back here.
So the same thing is happening here. This size, from here to here, fits the 2 bedrooms and the bathroom and the staircase. So this is the size, if we're gonna have a 4th floor and make it useful, this is how big it needs to be. It's bigger than the third, it's more than 50% of the 3rd floor. That mathematical construct is, if I bumped this out, say the dimension of the porches, and I brought that additional dimension onto this and added that square footage, I would now be complying with the 50%. But I don't think that's a good reason to add more building. As I said, if it meant I could add 2 units,
Look,
even 1 unit, I say
I
yes.
know, but we got past that already. We're,
Well,
That's-
you just asked that question.
I would agree that proportionally what you're presenting is better than what's the alternative of 50%. So let's keep going on what you have.
Well, we're up to that July 8th point. So if you feel that this is a direction we should go, then we'll pursue this and we'll take it and bring it in the next meeting, develop further and with more details and materials selected and things like that.
is that the next step, or is the next step a recommendation for or against by us to the Board of Trustees to vote on the 4th floor? And then you do that, as opposed to,
Great question.
because
wish knew the answer.
frankly, I think that's in your best interest to not continue to develop this scheme, continue to work with us.
What we've
I
been
think
told.
yeah, go ahead.
What we've been told is, because I actually suggested it, I said, why don't we go to the Architectural Review Board and get this mass concept done, come back to the Board of Trustees, have the Board of Trustees make their final decision on site plan, because that's all they're approving is site plan. And then come back to the Architectural Review Board for, if there are material selections, detail selections, things like that, knowing we can't change the mass. And I was told that's not what the Board of Trustees wants. The Board of Trustees wants to have, planning board recommended it, Architectural Review Board
Got it.
recommended, and there's no way we cannot go along with those, although you and I both know we did exactly that. We delivered 100% of all boards to the Board of Trustees, and they said, nah, no, we don't want to approve it. It was 75 Main. And we now have a silly addition at 75 Main instead of a really good design that you guys worked on.
It looks really good.
You like it?
It looks a lot better than the original one.
All right, we got 100 Main Street here. We gotta stick to 100 Main.
It's the focus of the universe.
Now, didn't the Board of Trustees, though, recommend that?
Yes.
Or they indicated that they were satisfied with the fourth floor that's set back.
They were satisfied with this fourth floor that's set back 10 feet. They were specific.
Okay, so I think what's gonna happen is, if you're suggesting that this board say, yeah, we like that as well, going back to the Board of Trustees and then having to bounce back again. So, I mean, you're talking about.
I would
ping-ponging
love this
back.
board to make a recommendation and go back to the Board of Trustees and say, fish or cut bait.
Yeah, but if that question is, that's why I was asking the question, has that been asked and addressed, and it sounds like it has been.
It has been
The
twice.
fact that you and I necessarily agree or disagree with it is irrelevant at this point. We have an answer, let's follow to its logical conclusion.
I want to be very candid, because Dan deserves that, because he wasn't here for a lot of the previous years of this stuff. I use that word carefully, stuff. What we have had in the past is where there is great clarity, clear minutes. We get to a board, the board makes its recommendation, we come back, and all of a sudden the board goes, whoa, we're not ready to do this. So that has happened now twice. This board has recommended us for approval twice. Planning board has actually recommended us for approval now 3 times. If this board recommends it for approval, that'll be their 3rd time. The Board of Trustees, the previous 2 times, sent us back for reconsideration.
So where do you think you are now?
I worry that you know Sisyphus, right?
Hold on a second, wait. You're saying that this board approved this project twice? Oh, okay, because I never.
No, you approved in.
Other projects, yeah, okay, fine.
The 2016 version and the 2000, both times, the minutes show, one of them was very clear, you said we recommend approval. The other time, was the August meeting, was the chair.
Oh, but we're talking about this
project.
100 Main Street.
Right, we're talking 100 Main Street.
Let's talk about, wait, let's just, because it's almost midnight, let's just talk about this plan right here.
Right.
Not.
This plan has been
2006.
recommended for approval by the planning board, and we were then sent to the Board of Trustees, to the Architectural Review Board. We have now been at 2 Architectural Review Board meetings for this. One of them was in June, the other one's tonight.
If you would like this board to opine or recommend to the Board of Trustees that this is the plan they like, that's fine, but you're gonna have to go to the Board of Trustees with that, and then come back here for the detail and the materials and all of that.
I'm willing to do either one I want this board to tell me what it wants me to do, and then I will do that. If this board would like me to come in 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks, because 2 weeks is Veterans Day, what I would do is that we would develop this further, come in and say, here are the materials, here are the details, we've charted it up with all this detail on the windows or something that they'll say, we liked it better without them. But they'll be in a position then to make a recommendation.
Gotcha, so here's what I'm gonna suggest, at the risk of hat trick. We would like to try to work this scheme out between this meeting and the next meeting, and then have a proposal that is ready for, final presentation to the Board of Trustees for an approval, and we'll make our recommendation at that time. So let's get into the form and details and go from there. And then you can come back, we'll work out a meeting so that we don't have to wait till December and whatever that is, 3 weeks.
It looks like on the agenda it indicates a November 25th meeting.
Right, yeah.
That's the next.
So the only issue with that is that we'll be told kind of that week before that that's the week of Thanksgiving. and an important decision that this board will be making on 41 or 43 Cedar should not be made that week because people will be away. So,
We'll work that out. Let's work on this for now.
yeah,
Let's,
so it could be the 18th.
what's your, anyone wanna start?
Can you tell me how much of the existing building you're destroying?
We are changing all of the kitchens.
I'm sorry?
We're changing all of the kitchens, including location of the kitchens.
No, from the outside, you're taking
On
the
the
roof-
outside, we're not-
You're taking the roof off.
We're taking the roof off. We're leaving existing window openings everywhere. We're changing this one corner, and then we're extending this wall
It's got
longer.
an existing roof there, right?
Is that a new cornice or?
That's a new cornice.
Okay.
And that cornice is slightly higher. That cornice is set at 3 feet above the deck. So that would be the railing. There wouldn't
That's
be
the
any-
railing.
Yeah.
And what was the explanation about not being able to treat the corner differently?
I
Because
think.
I don't think that has anything to do with the whole.
No, with that, when Michael and I had a really good conversation about this, the feeling I got, wouldn't it be nice if we could actually affect this?
Yeah.
And we could change the way this whole corner
I think
worked.
that was a conversation that we had with the entire board at the last time in June.
Yeah, it was to wrap, it was that the core, is that the
Right.
view from this, this building is different than others on Main Street that are
Right.
sort of landlocked, so to speak, and, setting back just at the front solves one problem, but not the other on this particular building. So I guess the answer is, we talked about how to turn the corner mostly with what was happening on the fourth story.
This kind of turns the corner, but it doesn't
Yeah.
really, I just think
I mean,
the turn could be,
this is the right way, I think, if you're just doing the first floor, this is what you do. The challenge is there any reason to change this on the exterior of the building? This setback and this effectively align. So if you were walking down the street, you'd see a relationship between those things. It's the kind of thing that somebody wouldn't necessarily articulate, but they'd actually see it. So if we were to say, let's take a step and say, okay, well, we're gonna keep the cornice to here, and then what we're gonna do is do something different from here to here, so that this front corner looks like we turned the corner. I think that's a step in the wrong direction. I think keeping the corners come across and making this all tie together is preferable, even if it means that we can't articulate this corner more. If we change the materials, say on the front here and to here, I think we end up again making it look less. The idea that when you see, because when you're coming down the street, you see most of this side. So if you see this side in the front as one box, one building, one material with one cornice, one type of window, I think that's a better way to do it than to bring more attention to this corner, which you could do if you were doing the whole new building. Christina did a nice job with it. We can't really do that here.
The only problem I have is that your plan reflects it as being one building and your elevation is talking something else. I have a big problem.
We're not trying to do truth in architecture here where our plan is reflected in the exterior.
I think it's a lost opportunity personally.
Well, the challenge you've got is you're limited in what you're putting into this building. If we're putting 4 apartments in, you have to make those work out. And trying to articulate this exterior more so it reflects that, I think gets us to that dangerous place where we're making it more interesting but not better. It's the kind of thing, being famous for 15 minutes, it'll be, wow, that's really different, but then it becomes boring for the next 100 years. So I think keeping it as simple as it can be is preferential to trying to make it more interesting, having the exterior reflect the massing of the use of the interior. I just think, if you wanted to consider the first floor coming back further, but not that band, because actually people would walk into it on the sidewalk, that's something that could be done. There could be, this material, a material could come across, picking up these points, coming to there, and this whole bottom could be done in a different color or something, maybe.
Okay, I'm gonna say it, I think that the way that the existing building is treated is fine, and the material is fine. I'm just curious to see if more windows on on the street. But-
Yeah, the-
But I'm not sure.
I might be able to put 2 more windows in, to the bedrooms. The challenge is, and then I get 4 windows in the
I
bedrooms
saw it
and
in
more
the
on the other
plans.
side.
I think that the plans that you presented are
Yeah,
fine.
you've always liked the plans.
I looked at it, this is what, I guess you made a good effort in this case.
In this case, thank you.
This is one of your best plans, but, I'm just.
What do you see 156?
Okay, and the addition, there is something about, there is one of the views that from the street, from the high of the street, the differentiate, the setback might not be substantial enough.
The 2 foot?
Yeah, it may be too.
What I think it does is it clears the cornice, so the cornice feels like it's.
I know, but
it's
if you
really-
look at it, you know, from the street, from the main street, the setback is substantial and it works. But may need a little bit of tweaking there. It's up to you.
Define tweaking.
Yes.
In what way?
Another foot.
Going back another foot?
Well, yeah, but I think the 2 foot, if you go to the view from coming down, was that Chestnut?
No.
Elm.
No.
Coming
Yeah, that's it,
down
that's it.
Elm, I
That's
think,
the view that is problematic.
yeah, I think when you, just the return from the existing building to the new is too,
Too much skin, like.
yeah, yeah, that's right, it almost looks like, it's not enough geometrical separation. So I think that section
So you're thinking that would be where you'd add a
I-
foot, go 2
I think
3
you
feet?
should go in more, I think you go in more there, and then if you come back a little bit and square off the building, because I don't see how that little bump out helps you. I mean,
That'd be like 2 interlocking cubes. It'd be-
yeah, I mean, just so you can see the volumes a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, and I don't really think that there's any value, I know you mentioned that the horizontal band and the vertical band are almost equal, but I don't think that helps you. And, I think you'd be better off with more mass at the back and less setting in further. And I don't think a foot is enough, I think I mean, I'm just looking.
I have 12, 10 in the bedrooms.
Yeah, you've got 12
So if I
foot
need
wide
to
bed.
make those
You've got a 12 and a 13.
Right, so if I went to 11, 10 instead of 12, 10 and added a foot to there, you know, I'm giving up nice space, you know, somebody's gonna come someday and say, you know, you made my bedroom too small, but, it would actually work. If that was 11, 10, that would be enough space there. So if you want me to try
Even
and.
if you do 12, I think, try 12.
Well, that's around
What
10
do you-
inches.
What do you gain by expanding
Expanding the
existing building? Making that mass bigger, the existing mass bigger?
What do you, in what way?
Like
No,
why-
that works, proportionally works.
Yeah, but not when it's not proportional to the back.
No, it works.
What they're talking about is this moving in a foot.
No, I hear you, I'm just questioning as to why you're expanding the flat face.
This one.
Yeah. Why?
I think they're thinking that it will make the front building look more substantive.
Yeah.
You know, picture, you go the other way and realize how bad, you know, if the offset was 1 foot, it wouldn't feel like it's enough to warrant having the step. 2 foot, I thought was maybe enough. I think now what we're thinking is if we went 3 feet, it would be a stronger articulation.
Yes.
And it would make the 4th floor smaller.
Yeah?
It would make the fourth floor smaller.
Yeah.
So it would be closer to 50%. Now, if we put a 5th story, we'd need an elevator. You want to show me what you're sketching, or is it private?
Just. That's not right. Yeah, except that, to scale, is like,
I know, but
You know, and it's like 6 feet or more, and that's the issue. That's a good diagram, but that's not the diagram.
Yeah, that was the same problem I had on 145 Palisades too, you know, it looked good on the sketch. In reality, it doesn't work.
I
Even
think
the
that
zipper
you,
doesn't work right.
because you're gonna come back, and, maybe we've all just been here for too long. But I think that the more you push that in, the more successful it becomes.
Yeah, I'm certainly willing to try and push it into that dimension.
And then, really, I think we should also look at how those two buildings meet each other. Really, just right there, that's the one that really counts.
I mean, wouldn't you want that to be as unarticulated as possible? It would be just whatever that one siding is forms a line with whatever the other siding is? You wouldn't.
Yeah, but what's happening where the porch, you see how the porch kind of wraps around?
Right, the porch
I don't know, it's very
wraps
dark,
around.
it's hard for me to see, but those kinds of things are important. I don't disagree with you that a kind of minimalist
Right.
relationship between the two
Well, that's something.
is the right way, but then it kind of gets damaged with that little piece of porch roof that wraps, and then you know, like the trim comes through, and then
But I think
you
the
lose the
porch-
line, you lose the clarity.
The porch wrapping around, I think, helps make that feel like it's there. I think if the porch comes inbound from that, we're making too much of that corner of the new corner becomes too much. Having that roof interrupted gives more power to the existing building corner.
But this one, you have to see everything
I mean, we had lots of more decorated versions
going on.
with bands wrapping around, but it didn't seem to be the right direction.
It's very strong.
All right, Paul's
He lives in
Seriously, I mean, I think the courtyard view needs a lot of help because that's the first thing I will see every day I walk home from here.
What would you do with the courtyard view?
I'm not the designer, you are the
No,
designer.
I'm not asking design.
Really, it doesn't work at all, that courtyard view. It's flimsy, what bumps out over here.
Here, I can't
I-
see.
Oh, the rear elevation.
The rear elevation, that's what the way you call
Yeah,
it, the courtyard elevation. It really is just, you know, the porch proportion is off, you know.
That's
this
what I'm saying
bump out
about this,
doesn't work.
you know, about like, maybe, you know, you come in more and you push out more. EAR doesn't like an asymmetrical plan, but.
And what Yair has
you
drawn over
come in
there
more
is a very
dramatically and
different
then,
proportion
you know,
of what
maybe you come out
exists.
more.
Look at the existing plan, it's not that. I think this is the last opportunity for design.
You think what?
It's a lost opportunity, really.
How do you not lose the opportunity? I'm not
I don't
understanding.
think this works. But as I said, you're the designer.
Right, but it doesn't work because it's proportioned wrong?
The proportion's wrong, the material is wrong, the way the whole thing is treated is wrong, everything about it, you know, it's a lost opportunity, it really is.
I had what I thought was a really, really great design. This board did not agree.
Estimated?
That's fine. It's the way it works. You cannot agree, and I have to listen to that. Me not agreeing doesn't really matter.
I seriously think especially this is a view that people are gonna see as they come down Elm. It just doesn't work.
Having nothing there would not make it better.
Well, I don't know what's gonna work, as I said, I'm not.
I think
designer.
having a
I
porch
can give
that
us-
comes across and gives people a place to sit is a nice thing.
Of course, no question about it, but then from the courtyard, what you're looking at for the building is what I'm questioning.
The building is a simple facade.
It's this design. Anyways,
Just listen to her.
I'm
Don't
trying.
take it- don't take it as an argument.
I'm not getting in an argument, I'm trying to understand. It doesn't do me any good to hear it, I'm not understanding.
It's 11:40, nobody's making the.
All right.
Steve, this is the time when you and I have done some of our tests.
EIR suggested something, which I think I think maybe is an interesting idea.
I particularly like the elephant in the grass. And the flagpole is definitely.
No, you know, I think that
But this reminds me too much of Hannibal Lecter. That when he has the
No,
guy on stage.
that's an angel.
Oh, an angel.
Anyway,
Okay.
if this volume were more like this volume, without this goofy roof,
So you wouldn't have the roof on?
I think it's worth you.
The roof, you won't see it from the.
You're
I know.
probably gonna see it, and maybe this is, maybe you just do stucco all the way down here, and it's just a change in volume. Yeah, it's just a massive change, right? It's such a small building.
Your take on that?
What's that?
Keeping it where there'd be two stucco masses, no change of materials.
I think that would help.
Okay, well, that's a constructive thing. That's a
Would you
real
agree?
idea that I can do something with. Telling me that it just
I
doesn't
think that
work
would help.
doesn't help at all.
There's a building in the meat packing.
And to be perfectly honest,
It's like these two interlocking cubes that are just. Shop architects.
Made out of the same,
this Darth Vader thing here too is it just,
Darth
if
Vader?
maybe it's just a rectangular, it's just really, the diagram's just really simple, it's just a rectangular volume. You don't have to do these setbacks, you add a little more closet or a little more space to the bedroom and plan, we're more like this.
well, you're a
You just
little
add
bit
it, you
past.
add it.
That's like a 5-foot setback.
Well, you add in, you just fill in here,
So okay,
and you get a little,
Yeah.
you get a desk and a bed, and
that's.
I know
fine.
you said there's a.
No, we're giving up 1 foot, and so if I got a little, I'm not unhappy, I forget what even what the size of these are, it's like 1,700 square feet or something.
I just think that helps address and simplify.
So
just
get rid of that
concern.
piece pumping out,
Just so it
that
doesn't
makes
get,
you happier.
so it doesn't get so tortured back here.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, I'll have to see what it looks like.
No, you have to make a decision right now.
Now, we gave you some options.
What do we need?
You got some
It's
options.
11:45, you make decisions without seeing them now.
I have a 7:30 meeting in the morning.
All right.
In Rye.
Rye's a nice place, I like it.
I think,
Yeah, you would have a real problem with your code because they have that.
How many houses have I done in Rye?
all right, we're indifferent to that question. We are gonna see you soon.
Did any of you want
Make
a
a-
bottle of the Suzanne?
No, I got one of those.
Do you know the joke?
I would have taken it if it were.
Motion to
It's,
continue this to the next hearing.
it's Frank.
Okay, your
I would have taken it if it were.
seconds
I
were
don't contain it.
all unanimous.
What's it? Continue.
Motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all. Everybody on everything. Christina's presentation.